Close your eyes for a moment. Well, don't actually close them if you're reading this on a screen. But you get the idea. Imagine yourself drifting, slowly, quietly, backwards through time. The seconds tick by, then the minutes, then the years. Our modern world, with its traffic, its phones buzzing, its late-night snacks, begins to peel away. We pass back through centuries like flipping through a book really fast. The cars disappear, the lights of the city dim, houses shrink into the ground. Villages vanish, castles fade into mist, the pyramids of Egypt crumble in reverse until they are just piles of stone again. Keep drifting. Now we're way past recorded history. No more written words. No more humans at all. Just forests, rivers, animals roaming free. Keep going further back. The Ice Age melts away. Mammoths stomp backwards into the cold. Saber-toothed cats vanish into the shadows. Still we go, further and further. We pass through millions of years like they're just seconds. The continents slide around under our feet like giant puzzle pieces shifting across the table. Oceans swell and shrink. Volcanoes rumble and spit fire. It's a dizzying ride, but stay calm. This is bedtime history, after all. No roller coasters here. Just a slow, steady journey. Now we've gone back about 200 million years. And here we'll pause. This is where our story begins. Welcome to the early Jurassic period. The world you've never seen. The world we've arrived in looks both familiar and strange. You might recognize the bright green of plants, the rolling hills, the blue of rivers and lakes. But the details are different. The trees are not the oak or pine or mango trees you know. Instead, the land is covered with towering ferns, horsetails as tall as small houses, and spiky cycads. The air is warm, a little heavier than ours, with more carbon dioxide swirling around. It smells earthy, damp, maybe even a little spicy from all the resin dripping out of those ancient plants. Above you, the sky is the same blue, but maybe a little hazier. And the stars you'd see at night? They're the same stars you know, but tilted differently because the continents below them are in new positions. Back then, the land was joined together in a giant southern supercontinent called Gondwana. Africa, South America, Antarctica, India, and Australia all cuddled together like one big family. But don't let the calm fool you. This is a world full of energy. Volcanoes rumble in the distance, reminding us that the earth is still restless. Huge rivers cut across valleys, and along their banks, life flourishes. And in this lush green world, walking slowly, cautiously, but with quiet purpose, is one of our main characters. A dinosaur named Massospondylus. Meeting Massospondylus. Now, before we go further, let's practice saying that name without tripping over it. Massospondylus. A bit of a tongue twister, right? It sounds almost like something you'd order at an Italian restaurant. Yes, I'll have the Massospondylus with extra cheese, please. But no, this isn't pasta. This is a dinosaur. A real one. One of the earliest long-necked plant eaters that would eventually give rise to the giants we know today. Creatures like Brachiosaurus or Diplodocus, the true titans of prehistory. Massospondylus wasn't as huge as those later cousins. In fact, it was kind of modest. About 4 to 6 meters long. That's the size of a small bus. Not tiny, but not skyscraper-sized either. Imagine standing next to it, its body stretched out long and lean, with a graceful neck, a balancing tail, and limbs that could walk on 2 legs or 4, depending on the mood. It wasn't a roaring predator. No sharp claws for slashing, no teeth built for tearing flesh. Instead, its teeth were shaped more for nibbling plants. It may have looked intimidating at first glance, but really, Massospondylus was more of a peaceful grazer. A pioneer in the art of being a gentle giant. Setting the scene. So here we are, the early Jurassic, South Africa, 200 million years ago. The air hums with the sound of insects, giant dragonflies buzzing lazily above a pond. In the distance, the calls of early dinosaurs echo, almost like the trumpets of unseen animals. The ground trembles faintly as herds move across the land. It's a world full of balance. Small, bird-like dinosaurs dart between the ferns, nibbling seeds and watching out for predators. Crocodile-like creatures sunbathe near riverbanks. Early mammals, no bigger than a rat, scurry under leaves, staying hidden from danger. And in the middle of all this, Massospondylus and its kin wander the land. They are not the rulers of the world yet, not like their future sauropod relatives will be. But they are the first whispers of a dynasty that will one day dominate the earth. Think of them like the opening act at a concert, the band that plays before the superstar takes the stage. They may not be as flashy or as famous as the headliner, but they set the tone. Without them, the show wouldn't be complete. Why Massospondylus matters. Now, you might wonder, why do we care about this dinosaur in particular? Out of the hundreds of dinosaur names you've heard, T-Rex, Velociraptor, Triceratops, why spend time with Massospondylus? Well, here's the thing. Massospondylus is one of the earliest dinosaurs we've ever named. Its fossils were discovered way back in the 1850s in South Africa, when paleontology itself was just a baby science. At a time when people were still figuring out if dinosaurs were lizards, birds, or something in between, Massospondylus entered the scene. And more than that, it helps us understand the very beginnings of the long-necked giants. It's like looking at baby pictures of a family. If you want to know how Brachiosaurus grew up to be the size of a building, you've got to check out its earlier cousins. Massospondylus is one of those cousins. This dinosaur shows us that evolution isn't about sudden jumps from small to huge. It's about steady steps. From little two-legged plant-eaters, to medium-sized long-necked wanderers like Massospondylus, to the titans that shook the earth when they walked. So if you're lying in bed, listening to this story, think of Massospondylus as your gentle guide through deep time. Not the scariest dinosaur, not the most famous, but one with an important role, the dawn of the long-necked giants. Let's stay here a while longer, in this strange and ancient land. The world around us hums with quiet energy, and if you sit very still, you can almost feel it breathing. The plants sway in the soft breeze, insects flit from leaf to leaf, and somewhere in the distance, water rushes over rocks in a river that has no name. It feels timeless, and in a way, it is. We've stepped into an earth that existed long before us, long before any of our ancestors even thought about standing upright. Yet even here, so far back in time, the story of life is already incredibly old. Life had been experimenting for billions of years before Massospondylus ever took a step. A world in transition. The early Jurassic was a time of change. Just before this, at the end of the Triassic period, there had been chaos, huge volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, and one of the great mass extinctions of Earth's history. A lot of creatures that once ruled the land and sea disappeared. But with every ending comes a beginning. The dinosaurs, which had been more like background characters during the Triassic, suddenly found themselves in the spotlight. With rivals gone, they had room to grow, to explore new shapes and sizes, to rise into new roles. And among them was Massospondylus, striding quietly into history. It didn't know, of course. No dinosaur ever woke up and thought, "Wow, I'm part of an evolutionary breakthrough." No, they just lived their lives, eating, moving, surviving. But from our view, millions of years later, we can see how special this time was. Breathing the Jurassic air. Take a slow breath. Imagine inhaling the Jurassic air. It's thicker, warmer, carrying more moisture and more carbon dioxide. To us, it might feel a little heavy, like walking into a greenhouse. Plants love it, though. They grow tall and lush, covering the land in carpets of green. The forests are not the kind you'd go hiking in today. No birds chirping from the branches yet, no bees buzzing from flower to flower. Flowers won't even exist for another 100 million years. Instead, it's ferns, cycads, conifers, and ginkgos. The landscape looks like a mix of tropical jungle and open savanna, with spiky plants and leafy groves scattered across the valleys. Everywhere you look, there's life. Little lizards dart across rocks. Insects buzz and click. Fish flash in the streams. And above it all, the slow, steady steps of dinosaurs mark the rhythm of this age. A stroll with Massospondylus. Let's walk alongside our gentle dinosaur for a moment. Picture Massospondylus lifting its long neck, sniffing the air. Its skin is rough, maybe mottled in earthy greens and browns, helping it blend into the foliage. It takes a slow step forward, then another, its tail swinging lightly behind to balance the weight of its body. Its head turns toward a patch of ferns. The teeth aren't sharp knives, they're more like spoons, perfect for stripping leaves. With a steady crunch, 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 it munches away. Each bite is small, but over the course of a day, this dinosaur probably eats a mountain of plants. Its stomach does the rest of the work. With help from bacteria inside, the tough plant matter breaks down slowly. It's not glamorous, but hey, that's life. Someone's gotta eat the greenery, and Massospondylus was more than happy to volunteer. You might notice that it sometimes walks on two legs, rising up to reach higher branches, and sometimes lowers down onto all fours to graze. This flexibility was part of what made it so successful. It wasn't locked into one style of living. It could adapt. Sounds of the ancient world. Now pause for a second. What does this world sound like? Close your eyes and listen. There's no roar of lions, no call of birds, no barking dogs. Instead, you'd hear the rustle of leaves in the wind, the creak of tree trunks swaying, and the distant rumble of a volcano. Insects chirp, croak like amphibians call out near the water, and every so often, a low, resonant sound carries across the land, the call of a dinosaur. What did Massospondylus sound like? That's a mystery. But maybe its call was like a deep, breathy bellow, or a soft humming growl. Something that could travel far across the landscape, reaching the ears of others in its herd. Communication was important, even back then. Safety in numbers meant survival. Friends and foes. As Massospondylus wanders, it isn't alone. Other creatures share this land. Small dinosaurs like Lesothosaurus scamper nearby, quick-footed and wary, always ready to dash into cover. Early predators lurk, too, slim, sharp-toothed hunters that test their luck on the young or weak. But Massospondylus itself? It's not easy prey. Too big, too strong, especially when traveling in groups. A predator might try, but most knew better than to mess with an entire herd. The trick, as always in nature, was balance. The predators tested, the prey stayed alert, and life carried on. The magic of deep time. Let's step back for a moment, away from the ferns and the rivers, and think about where we are. 200 million years ago. The number is so big it almost feels meaningless. How can we, who measure our lives in decades, wrap our heads around millions? Here's one way to picture it. Imagine a clock. Not a normal clock, but one that represents the entire history of life on Earth. Life first appeared around 3.5 billion years ago. If that whole span of time were compressed into a single 24-hour day, then dinosaurs like Massospondylus wouldn't show up until around 10:30 at night. Humans? We'd appear only in the last few seconds before midnight. So here we are, visiting the late evening of Earth's great day. Dinosaurs are rising, taking the stage, and Massospondylus is one of the early stars. It's humbling, really, to think that our story is just a tiny flicker at the end of this cosmic timeline. Humor in the Jurassic. Now, let's be real. Dinosaurs are majestic and all, but life here wasn't always epic and serious. Imagine being a Massospondylus, bending down to take a bite of a fern, when a bug the size of your fist flies straight into your face. Not exactly graceful. Or picture a young one trying to balance on two legs for the first time, wobbling like a clumsy toddler. Even dinosaurs had awkward moments. It's easy to think of them as movie monsters. Serious, dramatic, larger than life. But really, they were just animals. They ate, they pooped, they tripped over rocks, they got nervous around shadows. In a way, they were a lot like the animals we know today, just with a bit more tail. The sun begins to rise over the ancient land. Not that the dinosaurs know what millions of years in the future humans will call this place, but today we call it Gondwana. The light spread slowly across rolling valleys and fern-filled plains, turning mist into glowing silver ribbons. Massospondylus stirs. Its long neck shifts upward, eyes blinking at the golden light. One by one, the herd moves, stretching like giant yoga practitioners who've just woken up from a nap. If you listen carefully, you might hear the rustle of tails dragging softly through the dew-damp grass. It's a calm beginning to a day that, like every other day, will be dedicated mostly to eating. And to be honest, that's not such a bad life. Breakfast, Jurassic style. If you've ever wondered what's on the breakfast menu for a Massospondylus, the answer is simple. Leaves. Lots and lots of leaves. The plants here are everywhere, and while you might think a diet of ferns sounds kind of boring, for these dinosaurs it's a buffet. Imagine walking into an all-you-can-eat salad bar that stretches for miles. There's no need to line up or argue over the last lettuce leaf. The forest provides more than enough for everyone. Massospondylus bends down on all fours, using its long neck to sweep across patches of cycads. Its jaws work methodically, crunching, swallowing, crunching again. Not fast. Not sloppy. Just steady, patient eating. It's a rhythm that goes on for hours. Sometimes it rises up on two legs to nibble higher branches, balancing gracefully, tail stretched out behind like a seesaw. From this height, it has a good view of its surroundings. Safety and snacks, 2 for 1. Mid-morning explorations. After breakfast, the herd begins to wander. They don't move quickly. No need to rush. Step by step, they make their way toward a river valley. The ground squelches underfoot where the soil is soft from yesterday's rain. Every so often, one dinosaur stops to nibble. Another pauses to scratch against the trunk of a conifer, leaving a mark that might last for years. Small animals scatter at their approach. Early mammal-like creatures, tiny, furry, mouse-sized things, dart back into burrows. A flock of small, featherless dinosaurs sprint away, their long tails bobbing as they run. Everyone knows to give the big plant eaters space, not because they're dangerous hunters, but simply because they're, well, massive. Imagine being stepped on by a creature the size of a bus. That's not something you walk away from. The air is alive with sounds. A chorus of insects buzzes from the undergrowth. Frogs, or frog-like ancestors of frogs, croak from muddy patches. Every so often, a sharp cry cuts the air, a warning call from some watchful dinosaur perched on a hillside. Noon heat. By midday, the sun is high, and the air feels heavy. Even dinosaurs know when it's time to slow down. The herd gathers near a stand of tall ginkgo trees, resting in their shade. Some lie down, folding their limbs carefully beneath their bodies. Others remain standing, heads drooping as they drift into a light doze. The younger ones, always restless, shift and shuffle, nibbling leaves even while half asleep. This is a vulnerable moment. Resting means lowering their guard. But that's where the safety of the herd comes in. A few adults remain watchful, heads scanning the horizon. If danger approaches, they'll know. Predators are out there. Not the terrifying giants of later times, but smaller, leaner hunters, swift carnivores with sharp teeth. They know better than to take on a whole herd of Massospondylus, but a lone straggler, or a baby that wanders too far, might tempt them. For now, though, the land is peaceful. The only real threat is the buzzing of giant insects, which annoy even dinosaurs. Imagine a Massospondylus shaking its head vigorously as a dragonfly the size of a pigeon whizzes too close to its eyes. Afternoon wandering. As the heat softens, the herd rises again and begins another slow journey. They move toward the river. From a distance, the water glitters like a ribbon of glass, winding its way between hills and forests. When they arrive, there's a moment of hesitation. Rivers can be tricky. Crocodile-like reptiles lurk in the shallows, waiting for something careless enough to step too close. The herd senses this, and they approach cautiously. One brave adult lowers its head, taking a long, careful drink. The others follow, dipping their snouts to the cool water, ripples spreading with every sip. A few splash into the shallows, flicking water up onto their skin to cool off. Nearby, smaller dinosaurs keep their distance, darting in quickly to grab a drink, then scampering away again. Everyone uses the river, but the bigger you are, the safer it feels. Evening shadows. As the sun begins its slow descent, the world shifts again. Shadows stretch long across the ground, insects grow louder, and the air cools just enough to feel refreshing. This is a busy time for Massospondylus. The herd spreads out, feeding once more before night falls. Their long necks sweep gracefully back and forth, like quiet metronomes ticking through time. In the distance, a predator's cry echoes, a sharp, cutting sound that raises the tension for a moment. Heads lift, tails stiffen. But the herd remains calm. Numbers bring confidence. The sound fades, and life carries on. Nightfall. Finally, darkness begins to settle. The stars emerge, glittering in the ancient sky. They're the same stars we see today, but shifted, tilted differently by the movement of continents below. Imagine lying on the ground, looking up, recognizing Orion, or maybe not recognizing it at all, because the stars have drifted just enough to change the patterns. Massospondylus settles in. Some rest on the ground, eyes closing slowly. Others remain standing, necks lowered. The young cluster near adults for safety. It's a quiet end to a long, leafy day. And in the distance, the world hums on. Crickets chirping, rivers flowing, volcanoes rumbling faintly on the horizon. Life continues, as it always has, as it always will. Reflection. So there you have it, a single day in the life of Massospondylus. No great battles, no movie-worthy drama. Just survival, patience, and the steady rhythm of living. It may sound ordinary, but that's the beauty of it. The ordinary moments are the ones that carried life forward for millions of years. Without them, there would be no extraordinary ones. And as we leave this quiet night behind, remember, this was just one day, out of millions, in the life of a creature that helped shape the future of giants. As night stretches across the Jurassic land, the herd of Massospondylus sleeps under the stars. The moonlight glints on their long necks, their breathing deep and steady, tails curled gently on the ground. They don't know it, of course, but they are part of something much bigger than themselves. These are not the famous giants yet. Not the thunderous Brachiosaurus. Not the record-breaking Argentinosaurus. They are the warm-up act, the first notes of a song that will grow louder and grander with every passing million years. But without them, the song would never have started. The dawn of giants. Here's the thing about Massospondylus. It may not be the most dramatic dinosaur, but it's a pioneer. One of the earliest long-necked plant-eaters to show what was possible. Its body is a kind of blueprint. Long neck, strong tail, plant-munching teeth. A design that nature would later scale up to mind-blowing proportions. Think of it like the first draft of an invention. Not flashy, not final, but full of potential. Without those drafts, you never get to the masterpiece. And Massospondylus was one of those drafts. Simple, effective, and just the beginning. Humor in hindsight. Now, if Massospondylus could somehow see its future cousins, it might be a little shocked. Imagine this dinosaur waking up in the Cretaceous period, face to face with an Argentinosaurus the size of an apartment block. It would probably look up and think, excuse me? How did we get here? I thought we were keeping it reasonable. And yet, this is how life works. Small steps lead to bigger ones. What starts as a modest bus-sized grazer becomes, through time and change, a creature that can blot out the sun with its sheer size. Why we remember. So, why tell this story? Why spend a whole chapter drifting back to walk alongside this not-so-famous dinosaur? Because bedtime history isn't about the loudest names or the scariest teeth. It's about the quiet power of deep time. It's about recognizing that every creature, no matter how ordinary it seems, carries a piece of the great puzzle. Massospondylus may not get Hollywood movies made about it, but it's a reminder that giants don't appear overnight. They grow from small beginnings, from creatures who just ate their ferns, raised their young, and kept on walking. And honestly, isn't that comforting? That even in a world full of chaos and change, the slow and steady path has its place? Returning to the present. Now, let's step away from Gondwana. Imagine the stars above fading, the dinosaur calls growing quieter, the ferns blurring into mist. Slowly, the landscape melts away, and we drift forward through time. Millions of years pass in moments. Dinosaurs come and go. New species rise, old ones fall. The continents slide apart like slow-motion icebergs. We move past the great sauropods, past the famous carnivores, past the extinction that ended their reign. Mammals rise, humans appear, history unfolds. Cities light up the night sky, machines roar, phones buzz, and here we are again, lying in bed, listening to the story of a creature from long ago. It's almost funny, isn't it? All that distance, all that change, and yet the story still reaches us. A gentle farewell. So tonight, as you rest, remember Massospondylus. Not the flashiest dinosaur, not the fiercest, but a quiet symbol of beginnings. The dawn of the long-necked giants. Close your eyes and picture it. A calm valley in the Jurassic, a herd grazing in the golden light of morning, tails swaying, necks rising gracefully into the air. No rush, no worry. Just the steady rhythm of life, carrying forward into the endless stretch of time. And maybe, just maybe, there's a lesson there for us, too. That life doesn't always need to roar or stomp to make history. Sometimes, it just needs to keep going. Step by step. Bite by bite. Day by day. With that thought, let the sounds of the Jurassic fade into the background of your mind, like a lullaby carried across 200 million years. Good night, Massospondylus. Good night, dawn of the giants. Let's take another slow step back into the ancient world. We've already met Massospondylus, wandering quietly across Jurassic landscapes, munching ferns like a living lawnmower. But to really appreciate it, we need to zoom out a little. Because Massospondylus wasn't just a random dinosaur living its best leafy life, it was part of something bigger. Something that was just beginning. The rise of the first giants. From small beginnings. If you rewind even further, back before the early Jurassic, dinosaurs weren't exactly rulers of the land. In the late Triassic, they were more like the scrappy underdogs at nature's party. Sure, they were around, but they weren't dominating. Other creatures, the big reptilian cousins called archosaurs, were the real bosses. Picture a world where giant crocodile-like animals strutted around like they owned the place. Some were armored, some had big jaws, and they weren't the kind of neighbors you borrow sugar from. Dinosaurs, compared to them, were smaller, lighter, and just trying not to get squished. But then came a turning point. Around 201 million years ago, the Earth went through one of those dramatic shake-ups it seems to enjoy so much. Volcanic eruptions split the supercontinent of Pangaea, filling the skies with ash and gas. Climate swung wildly. Many of those big archosaur rulers went extinct. And when the dust cleared, the dinosaurs suddenly had room to stretch. The moment dinosaurs took the stage. It's easy to think of dinosaurs as always being the stars. But the truth is, they only really started to shine in the Jurassic. With competitors gone, they expanded into new shapes and sizes. Some became quick little runners, others experimented with armor, horns, or long claws. And then there were the plant eaters who discovered that longer necks meant a better chance at reaching food others couldn't. That's where sauropodomorphs, the long-necked group that includes Massospondylus, come in. At first, they weren't giants. They were modest, medium-sized creatures, moving on two legs, nibbling plants, testing out the "what if we made the neck a bit longer" design. But little by little, generation after generation, they grew. Evolution is patient like that. You don't notice the difference day to day. But give it a few million years, and suddenly the world has something brand new. Imagine the scene. Picture the Jurassic landscape again. Herds of early sauropodomorphs dot the plains, grazing on cycads and conifers. They're not skyscraper-sized yet. More like small buses or vans with tails. But compared to most animals of the time, they look impressive. Long necks rising above the ferns, eyes scanning for danger, tails swaying with each step. They travel in groups, because even the first giants understood there's safety in numbers. A lone plant eater is an easy target, but a dozen or more together. That's a moving wall of muscle and bone. Predators think twice before trying their luck. You might hear them too. Deep calls rolling across the valley, like bass notes in an ancient orchestra. Communication was key, especially when herds stretched over long distances. It must have been an awe-inspiring sight, even at this starter size. These were the ancestors of creatures that would later weigh as much as 10 elephants put together. And it all began here, with dinosaurs like Massospondylus. Not the flashiest, but the first. Now, here's the funny thing. If you showed up as a time traveler in the early Jurassic, you might not have been impressed at first. You'd probably expect the colossal, thunderous giants you see in books and movies. Instead, you'd find animals that were big, sure, but not earth-shattering. Massospondylus was maybe 5 meters long. Impressive next to you and me, but tiny compared to a 30-meter-long diplodocus that would appear later. These were more like giants in training. But that's the beauty of it. Every story has a beginning. And Massospondylus was part of the opening chapter of the sauropod saga. Without these early, medium-sized pioneers, the later, truly massive dinosaurs would never have evolved. Humor break. The first draft giants. Think of it this way. Evolution is like writing a book. The first draft is never perfect. It's full of notes in the margin. Make the neck longer, add more stomach space for ferns, rework the legs for better balance. Massospondylus and its cousins were those early drafts. Good enough to survive, not polished enough to break records. But absolutely necessary to get to the final version. So next time you picture a titanosaur blotting out the sun, remember, there was once a prototype dinosaur doing its best to nibble plants and not trip over its own tail. So, Massospondylus wasn't alone in its early experiments with long necks. Around the same time, other sauropodomorphs were trying out slightly different designs. Some were smaller, some bulkier, some a little lankier. Imagine a prehistoric workshop where evolution is tinkering, trying out different combinations to see what works best. Some of these early giants faced challenges. Predators lurked everywhere. Plant life wasn't always abundant. Weather could be unpredictable, swinging from hot and dry to sudden floods or storms. But life has a stubborn habit of finding a way. And sauropodomorphs were nothing if not persistent. The early Jurassic world was essentially a giant proving ground. Every day, every step, every bite of fern was a tiny vote for you survive, you pass on your genes. And in this harsh but lush world, Massospondylus thrived. The challenge of size. Growing bigger comes with benefits and risks. A longer neck lets you reach food that others can't, giving you access to more plants. But bigger bodies mean more food is needed, more energy to move, more vulnerability if you can't hide. Massospondylus and its contemporaries were learning this balancing act. Its size was just right for its environment. Large enough to avoid some predators, small enough to remain agile and efficient in feeding. And yet, nature always nudges creatures toward experimentation. Over generations, some of these dinosaurs began to grow even longer, heavier, and taller. This incremental growth would eventually produce the giants of later Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Herd life and survival. Life wasn't just about size, though. Herding behavior played a crucial role in survival. Massospondylus probably moved in small groups, maybe a dozen to 20 individuals. There's safety in numbers. Predators are less likely to attack a herd than a solitary dinosaur. Herds also helped in finding food. One dinosaur's movements could reveal the location of the juiciest ferns or cycads. Young dinosaurs would learn from older ones where to go and how to feed efficiently. You can almost picture it, a calm morning scene, the herd moving slowly across a fern plain. Adults keep watch while juveniles nibble eagerly. A distant predator sneaks into view, but the herd's coordinated movement sends it scampering away. Life, in this sense, was a daily exercise in teamwork and patience. Breeding the next generation. Reproduction was another key part of survival. Fossil evidence shows that Massospondylus laid eggs, sometimes in clusters, like small nests. The embryos inside tell an amazing story. The babies grew inside the eggs with well-formed limbs, ready to start walking soon after hatching. Unlike many reptiles today, there's some evidence that Massospondylus may have exhibited basic parental care. Adults might have guarded the eggs or stayed nearby after hatching, keeping predators at bay. It wasn't human-level parenting, but enough to give the next generation a fighting chance. This combination of size, herd behavior, and careful reproduction created a formula that allowed the first giants to thrive. Slowly, over millions of years, these medium-sized, long-necked dinosaurs would evolve into the titans we think of today. The landscape of early Jurassic life. Let's step back and take a moment to picture the broader world. We're still in Gondwana, but the scenery is varied. Open fern plains stretch for miles, interrupted by patches of conifers and cycads. Hills rise and fall, their slopes dotted with volcanic rocks, remnants of Earth's restless crust. Rivers meander through valleys, glinting in the sunlight. Crocodile-like reptiles sun themselves on the banks. Tiny mammal ancestors scuttle under rocks and fallen logs, always alert. And scattered through all this are the first sauropodomorphs, including our familiar Massospondylus, grazing peacefully, moving in slow, steady rhythm across the land. Predators lurk, of course. Smaller theropods, swift, sharp-toothed hunters, might occasionally attempt to snatch a juvenile or straggler. But the combination of herd tactics, size, and alertness meant that Massospondylus and its cousins were rarely easy targets. Humor and perspective. Imagine one of these early sauropodomorphs trying to make sense of the world. A juvenile Massospondylus might stumble over a root and flop face-first into a patch of ferns. Another might try to reach for a high branch and wobble on two legs, tail flailing like a comical balance pole. It's easy to picture, right? Even the first giants had awkward moments. Evolution doesn't produce perfection overnight. It's a slow, messy, sometimes clumsy process, like trying to build IKEA furniture without instructions. Step by step, mistake by mistake, improvement comes. And yet, somehow, these first giants got it mostly right. Enough to survive. Enough to grow. Enough to lay the foundation for the enormous sauropods that would someday wander the earth. Lessons from the first giants. There's something almost philosophical about this. The first giants weren't flashy. They weren't fast killers or towering icons. They were patient. They moved, ate, and reproduced, quietly testing the limits of what was possible in their environment. From them, we learn that greatness doesn't always start with spectacle. Sometimes it begins quietly, step by step, in ordinary moments of survival. And sometimes, the things that seem small today, like a 5-meter-long Massospondylus grazing on ferns, can lay the groundwork for monumental changes millions of years later. Early giants begin to dominate. As time flows on in the early Jurassic, some sauropodomorphs start to push the boundaries of size. Step by step, generation by generation, necks grow longer, legs grow stronger, and bodies bulk up. These early giants aren't yet the skyscrapers of the Cretaceous, but they are already noticeable. Massospondylus, our familiar friend, remains medium-sized compared to some relatives. But in its world, it stands out. Imagine walking across a plain dotted with smaller reptiles and early mammals, and suddenly seeing a creature the size of a small bus lift its head above the ferns. It's both impressive and slightly intimidating. These early giants influence the ecosystems around them. By grazing on taller plants, they shape the vegetation, creating pathways for smaller animals and opening spaces in the forest. Their footprints churn the soil, affecting how water flows through the valleys. Even without meaning to, they're engineers of their environment. The balance of predator and prey. Of course, life isn't easy. Every step toward becoming a giant comes with risk. Predators are still around, though mostly smaller than the giants they stalk. Theropods, quick and sharp-toothed, constantly test the vigilance of these early sauropodomorphs. Imagine a young Massospondylus wandering a bit too far from its herd. A predator spots it and gives chase. The young dinosaur bolts, tail whipping, neck stretching as it sprints. The adults notice, sounding low warning calls. The predator hesitates. Safety in numbers works every time. These dynamics, the push and pull between predator and prey, shape evolution. Over millions of years, the pressure to survive encourages bigger size, stronger legs, and more efficient feeding strategies. Nature is patient, and it favors those who can endure, even if clumsily at first. The social life of early giants. Herding behavior becomes increasingly important. Massospondylus likely wasn't solitary for long stretches. Moving in groups provides safety, guidance, and learning opportunities. Young dinosaurs observe older members navigating terrain, avoiding predators, and finding the tastiest plants. You can almost see them, a young Massospondylus mimicking the adults, awkwardly balancing on two legs to reach higher branches, occasionally tumbling over with a grunt. The adults don't scold, they can't, obviously, but the lesson sinks in. Survival is as much about learning as it is about strength. Even so, social life isn't all business. Imagine small moments of play. Juveniles nudging each other gently, tails flicking like makeshift toys. Perhaps there's a bit of mock racing across the plains, tails swinging for balance, necks craning in curiosity. Evolution may be serious, but life itself still allows for these lighter moments. A day in the life. Let's spend a day with the first giants. The sun rises slowly, casting long shadows across a fern-filled valley. The herd awakens, stretching and moving together. Early morning is quiet, filled only with rustling leaves, distant water flows, and soft calls from the dinosaurs themselves. They move in a steady rhythm, grazing, pausing to drink from shallow streams. Predators lurk in the distance, but the herd's size and vigilance make them think twice. Juveniles experiment with balance and posture, while adults graze methodically, covering the necessary calories for survival. By midday, the sun is high. Shadows shrink, and movement slows. Some dinosaurs rest under the shade of tall cycads, while others continue to feed. By late afternoon, the herd begins to move toward water again, careful, alert, and coordinated. Night falls gradually, stars twinkling above, and the first giants settle down, safe for another night. Even in these simple routines, there's elegance. Life continues, quietly, steadily, shaping the future one day at a time. Environmental influence. The presence of these early giants affects more than just predators and prey. They are gardeners, engineers, and reshapers of their world. Their grazing habits influence plant growth patterns. Paths created by their movement allow water to flow differently across the land. The soil churned underfoot distributes seeds in ways that smaller creatures could never achieve. Without these medium-sized giants, the early Jurassic ecosystem would look very different. Small reptiles might dominate, plants could grow unchecked, and the balance of life would shift in ways we can't fully imagine. These first giants are humble, but indispensable. Humor in the Jurassic. It's worth noting that not everything is dramatic. Life has a way of sprinkling humor into evolution. Picture a Massospondylus slipping slightly in mud after a rainstorm, neck tipping over, tail flailing to regain balance. Or imagine a juvenile misjudging a branch, wobbling awkwardly, then trying again with exaggerated determination. Even in the grand march of giants, clumsiness persists. And maybe that's part of the charm. Even the creatures destined to inspire awe millions of years later had moments of mild embarrassment and trial and error learning. Reflections on the first giants. As the night settles over the Jurassic plains, let's take a moment to reflect. These first giants weren't the massive, earth-shaking creatures we often imagine. They weren't monsters of legend or the stars of blockbuster films. They were steady, patient, and adaptable. Massospondylus, along with its relatives, represents the humble beginnings of something extraordinary. Each step, each meal, each carefully avoided predator contributes to a chain of events that will eventually lead to the enormous sauropods of the late Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. It's almost poetic, in a way. Life doesn't need to start grandiose to leave a mark. Even the smallest steps, repeated over millions of years, can give rise to wonders. Life lessons from ancient giants. There's a quiet lesson in the lives of these early giants. They remind us that evolution, and life itself, works slowly, patiently, and sometimes clumsily. Growth doesn't happen overnight. Change is gradual. Progress is a long chain of small steps. And yet, even with all that patience, there's room for creativity and innovation. The first giants weren't perfect, but they experimented. Longer necks, stronger legs, herd strategies, parental care. Each adaptation was a little experiment, a small tweak that would pay off in the long run. We can see echoes of that patience in our own lives. Sometimes the quiet, ordinary steps matter more than the flashy leaps. And sometimes, being persistent, even if awkward at first, shapes the future in ways we can't imagine. Humor in perspective. Even as we admire the evolutionary brilliance of Massospondylus and its contemporaries, it's comforting to remember that they had their awkward moments. Juveniles stumbling over roots, adults wobbling while reaching for high branches, a tail swishing unexpectedly into a herdmate. Life, even in its grandeur, can be a little silly. And that's part of its charm. The first giants remind us that you don't need perfection to leave a legacy. You just need persistence, resilience, and the occasional clumsy misstep to keep things interesting. Closing the day. The sun has long set over the Jurassic world. Stars twinkle above the ferns and conifers. The river murmurs quietly in the valley. The first giants settle into their resting places, safe for now. Massospondylus rests among its herd, neck curled slightly, tail tucked neatly, eyes closing in the soft glow of twilight. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again. Feeding, moving, surviving, shaping the world with every step. And we, the time travelers listening across millions of years, can quietly watch and learn. There's a soothing rhythm to it, a gentle reminder that life goes on, patiently, persistently, and with a quiet kind of grace. The legacy. So, as we drift back toward our own time, remember the first giants. They are the unsung heroes of the dinosaur world. Their steady persistence laid the foundation for some of the largest and most awe-inspiring creatures to ever walk the earth. Massospondylus may have been modest in size, and its relatives were still experimenting with life's possibilities. But together, they began a story that would echo through millions of years. the first giants awakened, and the world would never be the same again. A gentle good night. Close your eyes and picture the herd silhouetted against the moonlight, the stillness of the Jurassic night, the gentle swaying of tails, the quiet rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. Let their slow, steady presence remind you that even the grandest stories start small. Good night, first giants. Good night, gentle Massospondylus. Sleep well in your prehistoric world, and know that your quiet footsteps still reach us across millions of years. Close your eyes for a moment, or just imagine it, because we're about to drift even closer to the landscape that Massospondylus called home. Up until now, we've mostly followed the dinosaurs themselves, watching them roam, graze, and interact. But life doesn't happen in a vacuum. The plants around them are not mere background. They're the reason these gentle giants exist at all. The early Jurassic was a world dominated by greenery, but not the kind you're used to seeing in a modern park. No roses, no daffodils, no tulips. Flowers won't appear for another 100 million years or so. Instead, the land was alive with tall ferns, spiky cycads, ginkgos, horsetails, and conifers. Plants that look like something out of a fantasy painting. Fern forests. The Jurassic carpet. Ferns might seem ordinary to us today. You might have a small one in your garden or see them growing in a shady corner of a forest. But back then, ferns were the skyscrapers of the plant world. Some species could reach the height of small trees, stretching several meters toward the sun. Imagine walking through a fern forest. The fronds tower over you, arching gracefully. Sunlight filters through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the ground. The air smells earthy, slightly sweet, and damp from the morning dew. It's a living cathedral, and Massospondylus moves through it like a quiet congregation, nibbling on the greenery as if blessing it with every bite. Ferns were not just decoration, they were food. The long-necked sauropodomorphs relied on them as a staple. And because ferns were so plentiful, these early dinosaurs had room to roam without worrying too much about running out of snacks. Cycads, the Jurassic cacti. Alongside the ferns, cycads poked up like prehistoric cacti, though without the intimidating spikes. Their thick, leathery leaves spiraled around a stout trunk. Some grew to impressive heights, and their seeds were often nutritious enough to catch the attention of herbivores. Cycads had been around for millions of years already, but they were still thriving in the early Jurassic. Their tough leaves weren't the easiest to eat, so dinosaurs like Massospondylus had to gnaw carefully, using their spoon-shaped teeth to strip foliage without wasting energy. It's easy to picture a juvenile Massospondylus wobbling on two legs to reach a cluster of cycads, then losing balance slightly and toppling into a fern patch. A minor mishap for a dinosaur, but one that might have caused a small ripple of chaos among the herd, or at least a curious glance from an adult. Horsetails, the living brushes. Horsetails are another fascinating plant in this landscape. They look like thick, jointed stalks rising from the ground in tight clusters, almost like a set of giant brushes sticking out of the soil. In some areas, they grew shoulder-high, creating dense thickets that were tricky to navigate. For Massospondylus, horsetails were a minor snack, but for smaller dinosaurs or mammals, these plants offered cover. Tiny creatures could hide in the stalks, ducking under the watchful eyes of predators. So, while the long-necked dinosaurs grazed on ferns and cycads, horsetails provided a playground, or a hiding spot, for the little guys. It's an ecosystem, after all. Every plant, every rock, every puddle plays a part in the daily drama of survival. Conifers, the Jurassic trees. Now, let's not forget the conifers. These are the true trees of the early Jurassic. Tall, needle-leaved giants that could reach impressive heights. Some had branching structures that resembled modern pines, though they came in a wider variety of forms. Conifers were important in more ways than one. They provided shade and shelter, shaped the soil with fallen needles, and even influenced the climate by producing oxygen and influencing rainfall patterns. They also created natural barriers. Thick groves could slow predators or force herds of dinosaurs into open plains, where herd defense worked best. And for a dinosaur like Massospondylus, conifers meant opportunities. Stretching up to reach leaves high above, a long neck becomes an advantage. While smaller dinosaurs struggled with limited foliage, the early giants could nibble the best parts of the tree, shaping both their diet and their future evolutionary trajectory. The soundscape of plants. Plants aren't silent, either. A gentle wind rustles through the fern fronds, creating a soft, whispering sound. Horsetails sway with a faint whap-whap as stems brush together. Conifers creak and groan as branches shift in the breeze. Even in this ancient world, there's music, a subtle symphony of life moving, growing, and reacting. If you listen closely, you can hear the dinosaurs' footsteps mingling with this plant orchestra. A herd moving across a fern plain sounds different than one moving through a conifer grove. The crunch of cycads underfoot, the rustle of ferns, the snap of smaller branches, every movement adds to the layered living soundscape of the early Jurassic. Humor among the foliage. Even plants have their comedic moments in this story. Imagine a Massospondylus reaching for a tall fern, only to have a branch spring back and flick its nose. Or a juvenile stepping into a dense horsetail thicket and disappearing, leaving only a tail sticking out. Nature had its own little jokes back then, and even the first giants were part of the punchline. Life was serious, yes, but never without a touch of whimsy. Plant diversity and the dinosaur buffet. The early Jurassic wasn't just ferns, cycads, horsetails, and conifers, though they made up the majority of the scenery. There was a surprising variety in plant life, each species occupying its own niche, contributing to the balance of the ecosystem. Ferns alone came in dozens of shapes and sizes. Some spread like low carpets, perfect for smaller herbivores to nibble. Others towered like umbrellas, creating shaded havens for little mammals and insects. Cycads were often clumped together, forming dense mini-forests within the larger plains. Horsetails grew in thick, water-loving colonies, lining streams and ponds. Conifers punctuated the landscape with their tall, needle-like forms. For Massospondylus, this variety meant a relatively steady diet. No one plant could support a dinosaur of its size alone, but together, they created a balanced buffet. Each day, it could graze from multiple sources, switching from ferns to cycads to conifer leaves depending on what was freshest or easiest to reach. The daily plant hunt. Let's follow a herd of Massospondylus through a day. Early morning, the dew-laden ferns are first on the menu. Each bite is methodical, chewing slowly, allowing the tough plant material to be processed efficiently. Juveniles mimic the adults, wobbling slightly as they reach for higher fronds. By mid-morning, they may move toward cycads. These plants are tougher, but also more nutritious. Stripping leaves from the trunk requires patience. Adults demonstrate, showing the young how to angle their heads and jaws for maximum efficiency. Some juveniles get a little overzealous, toppling small plants in the process. Chaos? A little. Amusement for our time-traveling eyes? Absolutely. By noon, the herd often migrates toward conifers. The taller branches offer leaves that others can't reach. Here, a long neck isn't just helpful, it's survival insurance. And in between these major stops, the dinosaurs may snack on horsetails or other minor plants, adding variety to their diet and keeping the digestive system moving. Seasonal changes. Plants didn't stay the same all year, either. Though the early Jurassic climate was warmer and more humid than today, there were still seasonal fluctuations. Dry spells could reduce the availability of ferns, forcing the dinosaurs to rely on cycads or conifers more heavily. Wet periods encouraged lush growth, creating a smorgasbord for the herbivores. Massospondylus and its herd likely developed subtle strategies to cope with these changes. They may have traveled along river valleys during dry times, where moisture kept vegetation alive. They may have followed the cyclical growth of cycads or migrated to areas where new fern fronds had sprouted. Every day required some observation, some planning, even instinctively. The ecological role of Massospondylus. It's easy to think of dinosaurs as just consumers, but Massospondylus also shaped the world around it. By feeding on ferns, cycads, and conifers, it influenced plant distribution. The constant grazing prevented some plants from taking over entirely, creating gaps in vegetation that smaller animals could exploit. Its movement churned the soil, which helped seeds germinate. Fallen branches and partially eaten plants provided habitats and food for insects, small reptiles, and early mammals. In this way, Massospondylus was both diner and gardener, quietly shaping the early Jurassic ecosystem without even knowing it. A symphony of senses. Imagine standing in a Jurassic forest as Massospondylus grazes. The smells are earthy and sweet, tinged with the scent of wet leaves. The air is humid, slightly heavy, carrying the faint fragrance of conifers. Sounds surround you, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the soft crackle of twigs underfoot, the occasional low call from a dinosaur. Somewhere nearby, horsetails brush against each other, making a faint swish-swish sound. Visually, it's a patchwork of greens. The dark, shiny fronds of ferns, the bluish needles of conifers, the spiky leaves of cycads. Movement is constant but gentle. A juvenile nudges its sibling aside to reach a fern, a tail swings to balance, and the herd progresses like a slow, living river through the greenery. Even humor exists here. Picture a young Massospondylus attempting to eat from a particularly tall cycad and misjudging its reach, only to fall backward onto a pile of ferns. Nature has its little slapstick moments, even in a world hundreds of millions of years old. Plants as life support. The plants of the early Jurassic weren't just scenery or food, they were life support. Oxygen produced by ferns and conifers sustained the atmosphere. Dense vegetation moderated temperatures and retained moisture. The diversity of plants created a stable ecosystem, allowing animals like Massospondylus to thrive. Without these plants, the first giants wouldn't exist. No ferns to munch, no cycads to nibble, no conifers to reach. These dinosaurs would have faced starvation, competition, or extinction. The relationship between plant and dinosaur was delicate but essential, a silent partnership written over millions of years. The web of life. The early Jurassic ecosystem was a complex web of life, and plants were at the center. They weren't just static scenery. They influenced every movement, every feeding habit, every survival strategy. Massospondylus depended on plants for food, yes, but so did countless other creatures. Small herbivorous dinosaurs nibbled on young ferns. Tiny mammal-like creatures used fallen leaves for nests. Insects thrived on the moisture and nutrients provided by plant matter. Even predators relied indirectly on plants. Without herbivores to feed on, the whole chain would collapse. It's a reminder that plants are more than passive. They're active participants in the dance of life. Every leaf eaten, every seed scattered, every frond bent by a passing dinosaur contributed to the balance of the ecosystem. Plant challenges. Despite their dominance, plants weren't invincible. They faced threats from herbivores, changing climates, and occasional fires. Massospondylus and its relatives were voracious eaters, and some ferns and cycads evolved tougher leaves or bitter compounds to deter munching. Imagine walking through a forest where some plants are subtly armed against being eaten. Tough leaves that make chewing a challenge, sticky sap that gums up teeth, or sharp spines on cycads. Dinosaurs had to navigate these botanical defenses, sometimes testing new feeding strategies or using their long necks to reach less defended foliage. Even plants played the long game. By producing lots of seeds, spreading them through wind, water, or animal activity, they ensured the next generation could thrive. And in this prehistoric chess game, both plant and dinosaur adapted, learning from each other in silent, slow-motion interactions over millions of years. The smells of the Jurassic. A forest in the early Jurassic was a sensory wonderland. Imagine stepping into it as a time traveler. The smell of damp ferns mixed with earthy soil, rich and slightly sweet. Cycads added a resinous, almost citrus-like scent that clung to the nostrils. Conifers contributed a faint piney aroma, carried by the warm breeze. Every inhale brought information. Herbivores could identify where new growth had sprouted. Predators might detect activity through disturbances in vegetation. Even small insects and mammals relied on these olfactory cues. Plants shaped not just the landscape but the very way animals experienced the world. Light and shadows. Sunlight filtered through the tall ferns and conifers, creating moving patterns on the forest floor. Some areas were shaded and cool, others bathed in golden light. This patchwork allowed dinosaurs to regulate their temperature. Resting in the shade during the hottest part of the day, grazing in sunlit clearings when cooler, they navigated their environment with subtle awareness. Young Massospondylus probably learned these patterns instinctively. A juvenile might follow an adult into a shaded area to avoid overheating, or reach a sunny spot to warm up after a morning fog. Life was as much about reading the landscape as eating or avoiding predators. Plant-animal interactions. Plants and animals coexisted in subtle partnerships. Massospondylus ate leaves, but in doing so, it also dispersed seeds. Footprints churned the soil, aiding germination. Fallen leaves and branches created shelter for smaller creatures. In effect, dinosaurs were gardeners without realizing it. Even their clumsy moments contributed. A tail swishing through a fern patch could knock down a few fronds, allowing sunlight to reach the ground and new seedlings to sprout. A juvenile stepping on a seed pod might crush it, yes, but others would survive to grow. Life was messy, dynamic, and interconnected. Humor among the foliage. Picture a small herd of Massospondylus navigating a dense fern forest. A juvenile pushes too far, disappears behind a frond, then emerges with leaves draped over its head like a green wig. Another tries to reach a cycad and wobbles on two legs, tail flailing to regain balance. Even in the serious business of survival, the early Jurassic had moments of comedy. Dinosaurs, plants, and the whole ecosystem participated in these small, almost theatrical events. Life was serious, yes, but it had its light-hearted side too. Reflection. The plants of the early Jurassic were more than scenery. They were sustenance, shelter, guidance, and subtle instructors for the first giants. Massospondylus learned from them, depended on them, and in turn shaped them in ways small and large. Their interactions tell us something about patience, adaptation, and balance. Even the smallest frond could influence a dinosaur's behavior. Even the quietest horsetail could provide cover for a tiny mammal. And over millions of years, these small interactions added up, shaping the evolution of entire lineages. Life, it seems, is a story written in both bold strokes and tiny details. Legacy of the Jurassic flora. As the sun dips below the horizon of the early Jurassic world, the plants settle into their nightly rhythm, just as the dinosaurs do. Ferns fold slightly with the cooling air. Horsetails sway gently by the rivers. Conifers stand tall, whispering to the wind. Even cycads seem to hunch over a little, resting their leaves after a day of being nibbled. Massospondylus grazes quietly among this green cathedral. It doesn't realize it, of course, but every bite, every step, every disturbance in the soil contributes to the ongoing story of life. The plants and dinosaurs are partners in a slow, patient dance, each shaping the other in ways both obvious and subtle. The quiet power of plants. Plants might seem passive, but in the grand scheme, they wield enormous power. They control the availability of food, dictate the paths of herds, provide shelter, and influence climate. Without their diversity and resilience, the first giants would have struggled to survive. It's almost poetic to think about. Dinosaurs, mighty and mobile, are shaped by creatures rooted in place. The slow, quiet growth of plants sets the pace for evolution. The gentle rustle of a fern, the shadow of a conifer, the spiky protection of a cycad. These are forces that guide survival just as surely as any predator's teeth. Humor in the greenery. Even as they play such a pivotal role, plants provide moments of light-heartedness. Picture a juvenile Massospondylus attempting to reach a high fern and misjudging, toppling backward into a pile of horsetails. Or an adult accidentally knocking over a small cycad while stretching its neck, sending a cascade of leaves raining down. Life in the Jurassic had its comedic side, even amidst the serious business of feeding, avoiding predators, and surviving. Evolution can be patient, but it has a sense of humor, too. Daily life among the plants. A day in the life of Massospondylus is intimately tied to these plants. Sunrise begins with ferns, mid-morning brings cycads, midday is for conifers, and horsetails provide snacks and shelter throughout. Each plant type offers not just nutrition but subtle guidance, shade, cover, or movement cues that helps the herd navigate the landscape. Imagine following a herd across a Jurassic plain. The sound of leaves rustling, the faint creak of conifer branches, the soft swish of horsetails brushing together, and the occasional low call from the dinosaurs themselves. It's a symphony of life, orchestrated by plants and animals alike. Seasonal rhythms. Plants also dictated seasonal rhythms. Dry spells or wet periods changed where Massospondylus and other herbivores traveled. Newly sprouted ferns in the wet season could create grazing hotspots, while tough cycads in the dry season became essential food sources. The dinosaurs learned to read these cues instinctively, moving in harmony with the cycles of their plant companions. Even small environmental shifts could ripple across the ecosystem. A plant that thrived in one valley could attract herds, influencing predator behavior, soil composition, and seed dispersal. It's a reminder that every component, no matter how quiet, has a role to play. Reflection. Plants and dinosaurs were partners in survival, shaping each other over millions of years. Massospondylus relied on plants, and in return, it influenced which plants thrived and spread. It's a subtle, patient, yet profound relationship, written in green, rustling whispers and slow-motion steps across prehistoric plains. The early Jurassic world teaches us about patience, interconnection, and the quiet power of seemingly ordinary things. Even the smallest fern can change the course of evolution when paired with a hungry dinosaur. A gentle farewell. As night falls, close your eyes and picture the early Jurassic landscape. Ferns sway gently in the breeze. Horsetails brush softly against one another near the water. Conifers stand tall, watching over the herd. Cycads cluster, their leaves whispering in the wind. Massospondylus grazes calmly, tail tucked, neck reaching for the freshest leaves. The herd rests nearby, safe for the night. The subtle sounds of plants moving, animals breathing, and water flowing create a lullaby carried across 200 million years. Even in this ancient world, life has rhythm, humor, and gentle beauty. Plants and dinosaurs alike teach us that growth is slow, persistence is powerful, and even ordinary actions can leave a lasting mark. Good night, Jurassic Forest. Good night, gentle Massospondylus. Sleep well in your lush, green world, knowing your story reaches us across the eons. Up until now, we've wandered alongside Massospondylus, marveled at its long neck, admired the lush ferns, and imagined the early Jurassic forests in all their green glory. But life wasn't just about calm grazing and sunlit mornings. Every paradise has its dangers, and the shadows of the early Jurassic were home to the first predators, swift, cunning, and always hungry. These predators were not the monstrous, movie-sized T-Rex type yet. Those iconic giants are still tens of millions of years away. But the carnivores of the early Jurassic were clever and opportunistic, filling niches where they could strike and survive. The hunters of the early Jurassic. Most of these early predators were small to medium-sized, ranging from about the size of a large dog to a small car. They were quick, light on their feet, and equipped with sharp teeth and claws designed for gripping and tearing. Their speed and cunning allowed them to challenge even the careful, herd-protected Massospondylus juveniles. Imagine a narrow path through a fern plain. Sunlight filters in, casting moving shadows. In the underbrush, A predator crouches, eyes sharp and nostrils flaring. It's aware of the herd, but it knows that patience can pay off. One mistake, a juvenile straying, a slow step, a distracted adult, and dinner presents itself without needing to fight the full herd. The art of ambush. Ambush was the name of the game. Unlike later predators that relied on brute strength, early Jurassic hunters depended on stealth and timing. They used shadows, foliage, and natural terrain to mask their movements. A low bank, a cluster of ferns, or the edge of a small grove could hide a predator until it was ready to strike. For Massospondylus, life meant constant awareness. Herds weren't just social structures, they were survival mechanisms. Adults positioned themselves on the edges of open plains, eyes scanning for movement. Juveniles stayed near the center, protected by both size and vigilance. Calls and signals were exchanged quietly, subtle warnings that predators could sense, but only if they weren't clever enough to bypass the communication. The tension of daily life. Every day had a rhythm dictated by both food and danger. Grazing in the open fields was necessary to consume enough ferns and cycads, but it came with risk. Forest edges offered shade and cover but limited food. Water sources were essential but often dangerous, as predators could hide nearby, waiting for the unwary. A Massospondylus herd moving across the plains had to constantly balance these factors. It's a delicate dance, really. Eating enough to survive while staying alert enough to avoid becoming someone else's lunch. Even the juveniles seemed to understand this instinctively, staying close to adults, learning the paths, and following subtle signals without needing instruction. Humor amidst danger. Even in a tense world, humor sneaks in. Picture a juvenile Massospondylus who notices a predator sneaking behind a bush, freezes in panic, then sneezes. The predator flinches, startled by this unexpected sound, and the herd has just enough time to react. Sometimes survival comes down to small, ridiculous coincidences, and the early Jurassic had plenty of them. Life for a first giant was a mix of grace, caution, and occasional slapstick comedy. Evolution rewarded awareness, speed, and herd coordination, but it also benefited those lucky enough to survive awkward mishaps. The predator-prey balance. Predators weren't just forces of destruction. They were also part of the ecosystem's balance. By keeping herbivore populations in check, they ensured that plants weren't overgrazed. They encouraged herds to move, to explore new territories, and to adapt. In other words, they shaped evolution in subtle ways, forcing dinosaurs like Massospondylus to become more efficient feeders, more alert, and, eventually, larger. Every stalk, every rustle in the bushes, every glance over a shoulder was part of this ongoing negotiation between survival and sustenance. Predator and prey, hunter and grazers, were locked in an intricate, silent conversation that played out over millions of years. The senses of a predator. Predators relied on sharp senses to succeed. Keen eyesight helped detect movement, even through dense foliage. Nostrils picked up scents carried by the wind. Sensitive hearing could catch the softest footfall or the faintest rustle of leaves. Some predators were solitary, relying entirely on stealth. Others hunted in pairs or small packs, coordinating attacks with subtle signals. This combination of physical skill and behavioral strategy made them formidable, even against a herd of first giants. Evening shadows. As the day waned, the forest shifted. Shadows lengthened, and the predators became more active. Crepuscular activity, the time around dawn and dusk, was prime hunting time. Massospondylus, though careful, had to be extra vigilant, moving together, keeping juveniles safe in the center of the herd, watching every flicker of movement in the ferns and cycads. Nightfall didn't end the threat, it merely changed it. Small carnivores became stealthier, nocturnal creatures stirred, and the rustling of leaves took on new meaning. Survival was a constant process, a rhythm dictated by the dual forces of food and danger. The early Jurassic was home to a variety of predators, each with its own hunting style and preferred prey. None of them were skyscraper-sized, but what they lacked in bulk, they made up for with cunning, agility, and persistence. One of the most notable hunters was a small theropod, roughly the size of a modern large dog. Quick, alert, and light on its feet, it relied on speed and stealth rather than brute force. With sharp teeth designed for slicing, it could tackle juvenile dinosaurs, smaller herbivores, or scavenged meals. There were also slightly larger predators, roughly the size of a small car. These were more powerful, with stronger jaws and muscular legs built for short bursts of speed. Unlike the tiny theropods, they often targeted mid-sized herbivores like young Massospondylus or isolated adults. Their hunting style was more strategic, waiting patiently and striking at the perfect moment. Together, these predators created a constant tension in the lives of the first giants. Nothing in the early Jurassic world moved entirely without caution, and even a single misstep could prove costly. The art of stalking. Predators of this era were masters of the subtle approach. A hunter would use shadows, vegetation, and terrain to remain unseen. Ferns and horsetails became natural camouflage, their movements blending with the predator's careful stalking. Massospondylus had to be constantly alert. Herd members acted as natural sentries, adults on the edges scanning the horizon, juveniles safely nestled in the center. Every rustle of a leaf, every distant snap of a twig, was a signal, sometimes false, sometimes fatal. Even with all this vigilance, luck and timing played a huge role. A juvenile stepping too far from the herd, a distracted adult, or an unlucky turn of wind could give a predator the edge it needed. Evolution, in these moments, was both patient and unforgiving. Predator-prey dynamics. Life in the early Jurassic depended on balance. Predators kept herbivore populations in check, preventing overgrazing and helping maintain plant diversity. Herded Massospondylus shaped their movements, forcing predators to adapt hunting strategies. In turn, predators influenced herd behavior, pushing juveniles and adults alike to become more alert and coordinated. This constant interaction drove evolutionary innovation. Longer necks, improved senses, herd tactics, all were responses to the pressures predators applied. The predators weren't just a threat, they were architects of the first giants' adaptations. Hunting strategies. Different predators had different approaches. Small theropods relied on speed and agility, darting between ferns to snatch unsuspecting juveniles. Larger carnivores might coordinate in pairs or small groups, using silent signals and timing to encircle prey. Some relied on ambush tactics, lying in wait near water sources or dense vegetation, letting hunger force the herbivores into their trap. Even the environment influenced hunting. Predators were aware of shadow patterns, dense patches of foliage, and narrow paths where their quarry might be channeled. Every move was calculated, every moment measured against survival. Humor amid danger. Even in these tense situations, there's room for subtle humor. Picture a predator sneaking through ferns toward a juvenile Massospondylus, only for the wind to carry a scent that alerts the herd. The juvenile freezes, the predator flinches, and the herd moves just enough to evade danger. Survival, it seems, sometimes depends on timing, clumsiness, and a little luck. Or imagine a young Massospondylus wobbling on two legs while reaching for a cycad, accidentally blocking the predator's line of sight. The predator waits, confused, before deciding the snack isn't worth the extra effort. Life in the early Jurassic had these little quirks, blending tension and comedy in equal measure. Nighttime predators. As evening approaches, new threats emerge. Smaller, nocturnal hunters stir, taking advantage of the dimming light. Massospondylus herds are more alert, adults forming protective barriers around juveniles, moving closer to water or open spaces where danger is easier to spot. Shadows lengthen, the forest whispers in the wind, and predators exploit every advantage. The first giants learn, adapt, and survive through experience and instinct. It's a delicate dance, choreographed over millions of years, each participant playing its role with patience and precision. The evolutionary push. The constant pressure from predators wasn't just about immediate survival. It shaped the evolution of entire lineages. Herd behavior, alertness, social communication, and even physical adaptations like stronger legs and longer necks all arose in response to these threats. Massospondylus is an example of a creature molded by both the plants it ate and the predators it avoided. Its world is a story of balance. Hunter and prey, plant and dinosaur, each shaping the other in ways subtle and profound. Imagine a quiet morning on a fern-covered plain. Massospondylus grazes peacefully, juveniles wobbling along with curious energy. The herd is calm, yet alert, a natural rhythm of life. In the shadows, a small theropod crouches, nostrils flaring, eyes fixed on a young dinosaur nibbling on a particularly juicy fern. Time seems to slow. The predator shifts slightly, avoiding a patch of crunchy leaves. A fern frond brushes against its side, silent, careful, precise. The juvenile lifts its head, sniffing the air, unaware of the danger. A heartbeat passes, then another. The predator inches closer, muscles coiled like springs. Suddenly, the juvenile sneezes, a tiny eruption of nasal chaos. The predator freezes, startled, while the herd stiffens instantly. Adults close ranks, low calls ripple through the group. In one swift moment, the threat dissipates, and the predator retreats. Humor and tension collide. Survival sometimes hinges on luck as much as skill. Chases across the plains. Not every encounter ends this calmly. Sometimes a predator strikes, initiating a chase. Imagine a slightly larger carnivore spotting a juvenile straying from the herd's center. The pursuit is short but intense. Legs pumping, tail swishing, dust rising as the dinosaurs navigate ferns and low cycads. Massospondylus relies on herd coordination. Adults flank the juveniles, steering the predator toward open terrain where their size and numbers create a natural defense. Juveniles, though clumsy, instinctively follow the path of least resistance, learning the rules of survival by trial and error. Even these tense moments can have comedic undertones. A young dinosaur might slip, tumble into a shallow puddle, or unintentionally block its pursuer with a sprawling tail. Chaos meets survival in a ballet choreographed by instinct, speed, and sometimes sheer luck. Strategies of survival. Massospondylus developed several strategies to cope with predators. Herd protection. Adults form protective rings or flanks around juveniles. Safety in numbers is an effective deterrent. Height advantage. Their long necks allow early detection of predators from a distance. A raised head can spot movement far beyond what smaller dinosaurs notice. Vocal warnings. Low calls or subtle sounds alert the herd to danger. The messages are simple but effective. Move, hide, or stay close. Agility and stamina. Quick, precise steps and the ability to keep moving without tiring were essential. Predators can run fast, but over time, endurance favors the prey. These strategies illustrate that survival isn't just about size or strength. It's about awareness, cooperation, and adaptation. Predator tricks. Predators, however, aren't one-dimensional either. They employ tricks to counter herd defenses. Some use patience, lying in wait near waterholes or shady groves. Others coordinate in small packs, taking advantage of blind spots or timing movements to isolate a juvenile. Imagine a predator duo nudging a young Massospondylus toward a patch of dense ferns, where one predator waits for the perfect moment to strike. The tension is palpable, a slow-motion game of wit and instinct. Even when these attempts fail, they teach valuable lessons to the herd. Juveniles learn which areas are dangerous, which signs to watch for, and how to respond to subtle cues from adults. Every encounter, whether successful or not, shapes the behavior and evolution of both predator and prey. Humor in high stakes. Despite the danger, life still allows moments of levity. A predator might misjudge the timing of a jump and stumble over a fallen log. A juvenile Massospondylus might unintentionally block a predator's path while trying to escape, leaving the hunter confused. These small incidents are part of survival too. Nature is rarely perfectly choreographed. It's messy, dynamic, and occasionally comical. Even in high-stakes situations, the early Jurassic had its little jokes hidden in the chaos. Learning from danger. Every encounter strengthens the herd. Juveniles learn to stay close to adults, to watch for subtle movements in the vegetation, and to interpret vocal warnings. Adults refine their protective behaviors, adjusting positions, movement patterns, and even grazing spots based on past predator activity. This continuous learning loop, over millions of years, contributed to the success of Massospondylus and other early giants. Predators were both threat and teacher, shaping strategies, behavior, and physical adaptations. Evening calm. As dusk approaches, predators retreat or change tactics. The light fades, shadows lengthen, and nocturnal hunters begin to stir. Massospondylus, having survived the day's encounters, settles into familiar patterns. Adults on alert at the edges, juveniles in the center, tails relaxed but ready, heads slowly dipping to feed one last time before night fully sets in. The balance between predator and prey defines the rhythm of life. Every day is a subtle negotiation. Eating enough to grow, avoiding mistakes that could be fatal, and learning from each encounter. In this prehistoric world, survival is a blend of awareness, timing, instinct, and a touch of luck. As night falls over the early Jurassic plains, the predators retreat into shadows, the nocturnal hunters stir, and the herd of Massospondylus finally finds moments of calm. Life here is a constant balance. The push of hunger, the pull of survival, and the quiet rhythm of ecosystems maintained over millions of years. Predators aren't evil. They're part of the story. Their presence ensures that herbivores like Massospondylus remain alert, that herds move strategically, and that the ecosystem retains its balance. In this dynamic, every creature, hunter or giant, is both actor and audience, shaping the world in subtle ways. Evolution through challenge. Predation pressures drove many evolutionary changes in Massospondylus. Long necks allowed early detection of approaching threats. Herd behavior improved survival rates of juveniles. Even social communication, through low calls or subtle body movements, evolved as a response to predators. Predators, in turn, evolved alongside them. Speed, stealth, cunning, and coordination improved over generations. It's a silent arms race, not one of destruction, but of adaptation and refinement. Each chase, each near miss, each lucky escape is a step in the long story of life. Humor in the Jurassic shadows. Even amidst danger, the early Jurassic had moments of levity. Picture a predator trying to sneak past a dense patch of ferns, only to get tangled and stumble. Or a juvenile Massospondylus accidentally blocking its pursuer while running, leaving the predator bewildered. These little quirks remind us that life, even in high-stakes situations, has room for humor. Such moments also illustrate an important lesson. Survival doesn't require perfection. Luck, timing, awareness, and sometimes clumsy missteps all play a role. Evolution rewards resilience, not flawless execution. Nighttime lessons. As darkness settles, Massospondylus and its herd reflect, metaphorically, of course, on the day's lessons. Juveniles have learned to stay close to adults. Adults have refined positions and signals. Every predator encounter, successful or not, teaches new ways to move, feed, and survive. The night air carries the faint rustle of nocturnal predators, the distant calls of other dinosaurs, and the gentle sway of ferns and conifers. It's a lullaby written in shadows, movement, and quiet understanding. The herd rests, ready to face another day with the same rhythm. Feed, move, watch, survive. The interconnected web. Predators, prey, plants, and environment are interconnected in ways both visible and subtle. A predator's presence influences where Massospondylus grazes. Their grazing patterns influence plant distribution. Plant distribution influences smaller creatures, which in turn influence predator behavior. It's a network of cause and effect, invisible to most, but crucial to the story of life. Each participant shapes and is shaped, a reminder that survival is never isolated. It is communal, interwoven, and continuous. A gentle good night. Close your eyes and picture the scene. Ferns sway quietly in the breeze. Conifers whisper as shadows stretch long. Cycads cluster in the distance, their leaves catching faint moonlight. The herd of Massospondylus rests in a safe clearing, juveniles nestled in the center. Predators lurk, perhaps, but none are close enough to threaten. The rustle of leaves, the soft breathing of dinosaurs, and the quiet hum of nocturnal insects create a lullaby across the plains. Even in a world shaped by hunger and danger, there is balance, humor, and calm. Survival is about awareness, patience, cooperation, and sometimes sheer luck. And in the quiet of the early Jurassic night, the first giants sleep, the predators wait, and the ecosystem continues its slow, magnificent dance. Good night, hunters. Good night, gentle giants. Sleep well in your ancient world, knowing that your story echoes through millions of years to reach us today. Life for Massospondylus wasn't just about food or avoiding predators. Herding was central to survival, and the social structure of these early giants shaped their daily existence. Imagine a quiet morning on a fern-filled plain. Dew glistening on leaves, conifers swaying gently, and a herd of long-necked dinosaurs moving with deliberate, almost ceremonial grace. The herd isn't just a group of individuals. It's a living, breathing system. Adults act as sentinels and protectors, juveniles learn the ropes of survival, and the entire group benefits from cooperation. The herd's size and organization give each member advantages that solitary life simply cannot provide. Herd structure. Herds were likely organized with adults on the outside and juveniles in the center. Adults, larger and more experienced, shielded the younger, more vulnerable members from predators. This formation provided safety in numbers and made it more difficult for predators to target a single individual. Juveniles learned not just by observation, but by participation. Following adults' movements, mimicking feeding behavior, and responding to subtle signals. These young dinosaurs were essentially attending a crash course in survival, taught by millions of years of evolutionary experience. Even playful behavior had a purpose. Chasing each other, mock-butting, or testing balance helped strengthen muscles, coordination, and social bonds. Play wasn't frivolous. It was training disguised as fun. Communication. Herd life required constant communication, though not in the way we imagine words. Massospondylus likely relied on low calls, body language, and subtle movements to coordinate. Low calls, deep, rumbling sounds could alert others to nearby predators or signal general movement. Tail movements. A flick or swing might indicate irritation, a warning, or a playful gesture. Neck positioning. Raising or lowering the head could communicate alertness or reassurance. This nonverbal language kept the herd coordinated, efficient, and safe. Juveniles gradually learned to interpret these signals, understanding which calls meant stay close and which meant danger approaching. Grazing patterns. Herd life also influenced feeding behavior. Adults led the way to the best patches of ferns, cycads, and horsetails, while juveniles followed. The herd's movement wasn't random. It was shaped by plant availability, predator presence, and social dynamics. Imagine a herd moving like a slow river across the plains. Adults nibble at tall cycads, juveniles at shorter ferns, and the occasional waterhole attracts a temporary congregation for drinking. Movement, feeding, and safety all intertwine seamlessly. Humor often slipped into these routines. Juveniles might bump into one another while stretching their necks for leaves, accidentally toppling a small bush or stepping on a sibling's tail. Such mishaps were learning experiences, adding moments of levity to the serious business of survival. Protection from predators. Being part of a herd provided obvious protection. Predators, whether solitary or small packs, faced significant challenges when targeting individuals. Adults positioned themselves strategically, forcing predators to think twice before attacking. Even the herd size could intimidate a smaller predator, making an attack risky. Coordination among herd members was crucial. Adults on the perimeter monitored for threats, while juveniles stayed near the center. Movement, posture, and subtle sounds helped maintain vigilance. Every member had a role, and the success of one depended on the cooperation of all. Social bonds. Beyond survival, the herd likely provided social benefits. Relationships within the group helped maintain cohesion, reduce stress, and coordinate movement. Close bonds between adults may have facilitated cooperative care of juveniles. Young dinosaurs learned not only practical survival skills but also the importance of trust and cooperation. Even small gestures, nudges, gentle touches with a tail, or synchronized movement strengthened group unity. These seemingly minor interactions contributed to the herd's long-term survival and stability. Humor among giants. Herd life wasn't without its comedic moments. Juveniles, curious and clumsy, sometimes toppled into each other while stretching their necks for high leaves. Adults occasionally blocked paths accidentally, causing minor traffic jams in the herd. One can imagine a juvenile pretending to chase an older sibling, only to tumble into a pile of ferns, leaving everyone else momentarily amused. Even in prehistoric times, life mixed survival with subtle humor. Play, mistakes, and awkward moments were all part of growing up in a herd. Life in a herd follows a rhythm, a subtle cycle dictated by sunlight, food, and safety. Early mornings are for feeding. Ferns glisten with dew, cycads stretch toward the sun, and horsetails sway gently by streams. Adults lead the herd to these abundant feeding grounds, while juveniles follow closely, learning not just where to eat, but how to eat efficiently. By mid-morning, the herd may pause in shaded areas beneath conifers. Here, juveniles can rest, adults keep watch, and smaller members practice balance, stretching their legs and necks. Social bonds are reinforced in these moments. Gentle nudges, side-by-side standing, and tail brushes maintain cohesion. Even in silence, lessons are being taught. How to stay alert, how to navigate the terrain, and how to interact safely with each other. Migration and movement. Massospondylus didn't stay in one place forever. The herd often moved to follow seasonal growth, water sources, and predator pressures. These migrations could be short daily treks or longer journeys across the plains, guided by experience and instinct. Adults acted as guides, remembering the safest paths, richest feeding grounds, and optimal resting spots. Juveniles learned by observation, often stumbling at first but gradually mastering the art of herd movement. These treks weren't just functional. They were also part of the social learning process. Every step reinforced bonds and taught valuable survival skills. Even humor played a role during movement. Juveniles sometimes wandered off or collided with each other, causing minor chaos. Adults, patient and experienced, nudged them back in line. These little moments of clumsiness were both entertaining and educational, shaping the young dinosaurs' coordination and awareness. Feeding hierarchies. While the herd is generally cooperative, there's an unspoken hierarchy when it comes to feeding. Adults often access the best leaves and cycads first, while juveniles nibble on lower vegetation. This arrangement reduces conflict and ensures the youngest members are protected. Occasionally, two juveniles may compete for a choice fern frond. Their tussles are brief, playful, and rarely harmful. These skirmishes serve as practice for negotiating space, sharing resources, and understanding limits within the herd. Even eating becomes a lesson in patience, observation, and strategy. Social interactions. Herd life is more than survival. It's social. Massospondylus communicated constantly, not just to warn of predators but to reinforce relationships. Adults may signal reassurance, juveniles learn cooperation, and subtle gestures maintain group harmony. Some interactions are humorous. Imagine a juvenile trying to mimic an adult's warning call, producing a squeaky, imperfect version that confuses everyone for a moment. Or a tail flick intended to nudge a sibling ends up flopping on another dinosaur's back, eliciting a momentary pause before movement resumes. These small incidents create a sense of personality, even in prehistoric giants. Rest and safety. Herds also provide safety during rest. Juveniles often sleep or rest in the center of the group, shielded by adults. Even while resting, the herd remains alert. Ears twitch, eyes open, nostrils flaring. This shared vigilance reduces stress and increases survival rates. Rest periods also reinforce social bonds. Physical proximity allows comfort, communication, and subtle learning. Young dinosaurs watch adults' movements, picking up cues for defense, foraging, and interaction. Even when nothing seems to be happening, lessons are being absorbed. Humor in daily life. Play and humor aren't just distractions, they're part of the learning process. Juveniles tumble over one another while stretching, misjudge distances and bump into adults, or get tangled in low-growing ferns. Adults tolerate these antics, knowing that these mistakes teach balance, coordination, and awareness of surroundings. Life in a herd blends seriousness with levity. Survival depends on learning, but learning doesn't have to be grim. The Jurassic world had room for small comedy, even in the shadow of predators. A peek into relationships. Within the herd, relationships matter. Adults form loose bonds, coordinating movements and sharing responsibilities. Juveniles bond with siblings and peers, developing trust and understanding group dynamics. These relationships ensure cohesion, improve survival odds, and maintain order in a world full of potential hazards. Even subtle interactions, nudges, synchronized movement, or gentle corrections, strengthen bonds. It's a silent, slow-moving social network where every action matters and every mistake is a lesson. The herd is more than just a social group. It's a survival machine. Adults take up positions on the edges to shield juveniles from predators. They use their size, tails, and sometimes coordinated movements to create barriers between danger and the young. When a predator approaches, subtle signals ripple through the herd. A raised head, a low rumble, or a shift in stance communicates the threat without causing panic. Juveniles, trained by experience and instinct, respond instantly, moving toward the center of the group, blending with siblings, and trusting the adult's guidance. Even in tense moments, humor can sneak in. A juvenile might trip over its sibling while rushing to safety, or an adult might accidentally nudge another, causing a small chain reaction. These little missteps are part of the learning process, and sometimes they even save lives by confusing predators. Coordinated movement. Herd movement is both strategic and instinctive. When feeding, they spread out just enough to access food without leaving gaps in defense. During migration or in the face of threats, they tighten formation, creating a near-impenetrable wall of long necks, tails, and bodies. Adults guide the path, adjusting pace for the slowest juveniles while ensuring the group stays alert. Juveniles learn to maintain their position, follow subtle visual cues, and anticipate movements. This coordination strengthens over time, creating a rhythm that combines safety, efficiency, and subtle social training. Teaching the young. One of the herd's most vital functions is education. Juveniles watch and mimic adults, learning essential survival skills. Identifying predators, recognizing shape, movement, or sound. Feeding efficiently. Selecting nutritious leaves and avoiding tough or spiky plants. Navigating terrain. Avoiding hazards and finding safe routes. Social signals. Understanding body language, tail flicks, and vocal cues. Playful interactions serve as practice. Mock chases, gentle nudges, and testing balance all refine skills needed for survival. Humor and learning are intertwined. A stumble becomes both entertainment and instruction. Communication in action. Communication isn't just for emergencies. Herd members exchange subtle cues about food availability, rest spots, and movement. A gentle tail flick might indicate, "Follow me." A low rumble signals, "All clear." Neck movements can coordinate direction changes. Juveniles gradually interpret these signals, building an internal map of herd life. Over time, they move more efficiently, respond faster to threats, and contribute to the cohesion of the group. Humor in the herd. Even amidst serious survival lessons, the herd has its comedic moments. A juvenile might stretch for a high fern and wobble precariously, causing a domino effect among nearby siblings. Adults might inadvertently block a juvenile's path, resulting in brief confusion or minor collisions. These moments are essential. They teach spatial awareness, timing, and cooperation. Life in a herd mixes survival with subtle comedy, blending learning and amusement into daily routines. Water and rest. Access to water is vital, but it's also a potential hotspot for danger. Herds approach streams and ponds cautiously, adults scanning for predators while juveniles drink safely in the center. These moments require vigilance and coordination. Rest periods are equally important. Even while lying down or standing in shaded areas, herd members maintain awareness. Adults on the edges act as sentries, juveniles rest and recuperate, and subtle communication continues. Safety is maintained without constant panic, a delicate balance of alertness and calm. Social bonds and cohesion. The herd is a living social network. Adults bond through cooperative behavior, juveniles form peer relationships, and subtle interactions reinforce group cohesion. Shared feeding, mutual protection, and playful interactions strengthen trust and coordination. Even small gestures, nudges, synchronized neck movements, gentle tail touches, play a role in maintaining harmony. In this prehistoric world, relationships are as crucial as size or strength. Survival depends on cooperation as much as individual ability. While the herd functions as a cooperative unit, leadership plays a subtle role. Experienced adults guide movement, make decisions about feeding spots, and respond first to potential threats. Juveniles follow, learning from their elders. Leadership is not about dominance or aggression. It's about knowledge, patience, and the ability to keep the group safe. Leaders also teach indirectly. Their choices, reactions, and patterns of vigilance provide lessons for younger members. Over time, these lessons become ingrained behaviors, passed down across generations. Even without words, the herd communicates wisdom. The gentle humor of herd life. Life in a herd isn't all serious. Even prehistoric giants had moments of amusement. Juveniles stumble, bump into siblings, or misjudge distances while reaching for the tallest ferns. Adults occasionally get in the way of one another or nudge a juvenile in a gentle correction. These moments are more than comedy. They reinforce coordination, teach limits, and strengthen social bonds. A minor mishap becomes a teaching moment. Humor, even in small doses, shapes the rhythm of daily life. Feeding together. Feeding is both a necessity and a social event. Adults focus on the best leaves and cycads, juveniles follow along, and the group moves in a coordinated flow. The herd minimizes conflict by spacing members and maintaining awareness. Occasionally, a playful juvenile will stretch too far, wobble, or knock over a small plant, causing a ripple of reactions. The adults respond calmly, guiding the young back on track. These little events, while amusing, reinforce the herd's rules and cohesion. Coping with predators. Even in a herd, predators remain a constant concern. The group relies on vigilance, coordination, and social learning to stay safe. Adults on the perimeter monitor threats, juveniles respond to cues, and collective movement can deter attacks. Predators are part of the story, shaping behaviors and strategies. Every near miss teaches lessons: how to position oneself, when to move, and which cues to heed. The herd becomes a living school of survival, where each encounter hones instincts. Rest and safety. As day transitions into evening, the herd finds a safe resting area. Juveniles settle in the center, shielded by adults. Even while resting, subtle communication continues. A tail flick, a low rumble, or a shift in position ensures that everyone remains aware and connected. Rest reinforces social bonds, provides recovery, and maintains group cohesion. Safety and calm coexist. The herd embodies the delicate balance of survival, vigilance and relaxation, learning and play, protection and freedom. Reflections on herd life. Herd life shapes Massospondylus in profound ways. Cooperation, coordination, communication, and humor all contribute to survival. Social bonds provide strength, teaching, and reassurance. Juveniles learn not only practical skills but also trust, empathy, and cooperation, essential traits for life in a world full of predators and challenges. Even the smallest interactions, play, nudges, tail flicks, gentle corrections, reinforce the larger structure of the herd. Life in a herd is a complex, beautiful network of relationships, instincts, and experiences, finely tuned over millions of years. A gentle good night. Close your eyes and imagine the herd at dusk. Juveniles nestled safely in the center, heads resting on siblings or adults. Adults standing sentinel on the edges, eyes scanning for any sign of danger. Tails swaying gently, necks moving gracefully, subtle communication passing silently through the group. The forest whispers around them, ferns swaying, cycads rustling, and distant predators stirring in the shadows. Life in the herd blends calm, awareness, play, and humor. Survival depends on cooperation, observation, and trust. Even in a world of potential threats, Massospondylus and its herd find moments of calm, learning, and gentle rhythm. Good night, young dinosaurs. Good night, protective adults. Sleep well in your prehistoric world, surrounded by friends, guided by experience, and embraced by the quiet, green expanse of the early Jurassic plains. Life for Massospondylus was a journey from tiny, vulnerable hatchlings to long-necked giants roaming the early Jurassic plains. Growth wasn't just about getting bigger. It was about learning, adapting, and developing the physical and social skills needed to survive. Every day offered lessons, challenges, and moments of discovery. From egg to hatchling, Massospondylus began life in eggs roughly the size of a grapefruit. Tiny, fragile, and covered in a thin shell, they were both protected and exposed to the world. Nests were likely hidden among ferns or low vegetation, with adults nearby to guard against predators. Hatchlings emerged small and clumsy, perhaps only a fraction of their adult size. Their legs wobbled, tails swung wildly, and their necks weren't yet the long, elegant extensions we imagine in adults. But even at this early stage, instincts guided them. Following adults, staying close to siblings, and beginning to explore their immediate surroundings. Early learning. Juvenile Massospondylus learned quickly. The first lessons weren't about feeding or running. They were about balance, coordination, and awareness. Wobbly steps turned into steady walking. Flailing tails became tools for maintaining balance. Young dinosaurs tested the ground, learned which plants were safe to nibble, and began to understand social cues from adults. Even play had a purpose. Mock chases, gentle nudges, and curious exploration strengthened muscles, coordination, and understanding of herd dynamics. Humor and learning were intertwined. A tumble over a sibling or an accidental collision wasn't just funny, it was training. Physical changes. Growth in Massospondylus was rapid compared to many modern reptiles. Within a few years, hatchlings could double or triple their size. Limbs lengthened, necks stretched, and tails grew stronger. Teeth adapted to an herbivorous diet, becoming more efficient at chewing ferns, cycads, and horsetails. This growth wasn't uniform. Juveniles often had proportionally larger heads and eyes, giving them better vision and a slight edge in awareness. Their necks were shorter at first, limiting reach but encouraging mobility and careful grazing. Over time, their iconic long neck developed, allowing access to higher foliage and providing early warning of approaching predators. Feeding development. Feeding was a key part of growth. Hatchlings relied initially on soft, low-growing plants, while adults accessed taller cycads and conifers. As juveniles grew, their diet expanded. They learned which leaves were nutritious, which were tough or spiky, and how to graze efficiently without wasting energy. Humor often came into play. Juveniles might stretch too far for a tasty fern and wobble precariously, stumble into a sibling, or accidentally knock over a small plant. These mishaps were part of the learning process, helping them develop coordination, judgment, and awareness. Social learning. Growth wasn't just physical, it was social. Juveniles observed adults, learning herd behavior, predator avoidance, and communication. Subtle tail flicks, low rumbles, and neck movements all conveyed information. Over time, these young dinosaurs learned the unspoken rules of herd life: who to follow, when to stay close, and how to react in tense situations. Even minor interactions among juveniles helped shape social skills. Playful pushes, mock chases, and gentle sparring taught boundaries, cooperation, and resilience. Humor and social learning went hand in hand, ensuring that growing up in a herd was both educational and engaging. Defense and awareness. From an early age, juveniles learned the importance of awareness. Predators lurked, and even small mistakes could be dangerous. Staying near adults, interpreting warning calls, and moving cautiously became ingrained habits. Every step, glance, and movement contributed to survival. Growth was as much about developing instincts and strategies as it was about size and strength. By the time a Massospondylus reached adolescence, it had learned the majority of the skills needed to thrive in a predator-rich environment. Humor in growing up. Even as juveniles learned vital survival skills, moments of humor abounded. A young dinosaur might misjudge a leaf's height, tumble into a puddle, or collide with a sibling mid-chase. Adults often watched patiently, occasionally nudging them back on course. These moments were essential. They reinforced balance, coordination, and awareness, all while allowing the herd to bond and the juveniles to gain confidence. Growing up was messy, playful, and vital, all at once. As juveniles aged, they entered adolescence, a period of rapid growth, both physically and socially. Limbs lengthened, tails grew heavier and stronger, and necks extended further. Teeth and jaws became more efficient, capable of handling tougher plants and a wider variety of vegetation. Adolescence wasn't just about size. Juveniles became more aware of their surroundings, testing boundaries, and learning herd dynamics more deeply. Social interactions became more complex. Play evolved into practice for real-life survival skills. Mock sparring, chasing, and competing for space all taught balance, coordination, and understanding of the herd hierarchy. Herd hierarchy. While Massospondylus herds weren't strictly hierarchical like some modern mammals, subtle social structures existed. Adults often took the lead, guiding movement, protecting juveniles, and making feeding decisions. Juveniles gradually learned where they fit within this system, responding to signals from adults and interacting with peers. These social cues were essential for survival. Understanding which members to follow, when to move, and how to coordinate feeding reduced conflict and increased efficiency. Humor often played a role here too. A juvenile might accidentally block another or tumble into a sibling, momentarily confusing the group. Even in these small incidents, lessons were being learned. Expanding the diet. Adolescent Massospondylus began experimenting with different plants. While hatchlings relied on soft, low-growing ferns, adolescents explored cycads, horsetails, and occasionally low-hanging conifer branches. This exploration allowed them to refine feeding strategies, balance energy intake with effort, and develop preferences that would guide adult behavior. Sometimes this experimentation led to amusing mishaps. A young dinosaur might misjudge a tough cycad frond, wobble while pulling at it, or accidentally knock over a cluster of ferns. These minor errors were essential for learning proper feeding techniques while strengthening muscles and coordination. Physical coordination. Adolescence also brought refinement in movement. Long legs required better balance, tails needed precise control, and necks demanded coordination to reach food while avoiding obstacles. Play, mock fights, and chasing siblings all contributed to this development. Humor, once again, accompanied growth. Juveniles often misstepped, tripped, or collided, creating chaotic but instructive moments. Each slip taught awareness, each tumble improved balance, and each playful encounter reinforced social bonds. Learning about predators. Predator awareness became more acute during adolescence. Juveniles observed adults carefully, learning subtle signs, the rustle of leaves, distant movements, or faint calls. They practiced fleeing, staying within the herd, and responding to social cues. Some encounters were tense, some amusing. A juvenile might misinterpret a harmless shadow as a predator, causing a ripple of cautious reactions in the herd. Adults tolerated these mistakes, knowing they were part of the learning process. Experience, observation, and occasional missteps shaped survival instincts. Social play and cooperation. Play became a tool for learning cooperation. Juveniles chased, nudged, and sparred with siblings and peers, practicing movements that would later be used for defense, feeding coordination, and herd cohesion. Even humor had a functional role. A young Massospondylus attempting to mimic an adult's warning call might produce a squeaky, imperfect sound, causing the group to pause briefly. Such moments reinforced listening skills, taught subtle communication, and strengthened herd awareness. Preparing for adulthood. By the end of adolescence, Massospondylus juveniles had mastered essential survival skills. Efficient grazing across diverse plants. Awareness of predators and appropriate responses. Social interaction and communication within the herd. Coordination, balance, and physical strength. Humor, play, and minor mishaps had all played a part, ensuring that young dinosaurs matured into capable adults. Survival depended not only on size but on knowledge, skill, and social cohesion. By the time Massospondylus reached full adulthood, it had transformed from a small, wobbly hatchling into a long-necked giant. Adults could grow up to 4 to 6 meters long, with strong legs, a long tail for balance, and a neck capable of reaching the tallest cycads and conifers. Adulthood wasn't just about size. It brought endurance, strength, and a refined sense of awareness. Adult Massospondylus could feed efficiently across various terrains, evade predators with practiced coordination, and interact with herd members in complex ways. Physical peak. At full maturity, every part of the body served a purpose. Neck, long, flexible, and strong, allowing access to high vegetation and early predator detection. Legs, muscular and sturdy, enabling both steady walking across plains and quick bursts to evade threats. Tail, heavy and powerful, used for balance and subtle communication within the herd. Jaws and teeth, well adapted for a herbivorous diet, capable of chewing tough ferns, cycads, and horsetails efficiently. Each feature was honed through millions of years of evolution and individual growth, combining to create a creature capable of thriving in a dynamic, sometimes dangerous world. Social maturity. Adulthood also brought social responsibilities. Adults helped protect juveniles, guided herd movement, and contributed to maintaining cohesion. They were teachers, leaders, and guardians all at once. Social interactions grew more nuanced. Subtle tail movements, low rumbles, and gentle nudges conveyed messages efficiently across the herd. Adults used these cues to coordinate feeding, respond to predators, and maintain group harmony. Even humor persisted. Adults occasionally engaged in playful nudges or mock sparring, particularly during times of low stress. Such behaviors reinforced bonds and maintained cohesion, demonstrating that even giants can enjoy light-hearted interactions. Reproductive maturity. Adulthood marked the onset of reproductive capability. Adults sought mates, likely through subtle displays, body language, or low calls rather than dramatic battles. Nesting behavior became essential. Choosing safe locations, guarding eggs, and ensuring hatchlings survived the critical early weeks. Hatchlings were born into an environment rich in learning opportunities. Adults not only provided protection but also modeled essential behaviors: grazing techniques, predator awareness, and herd communication. The cycle of life continued, shaped by experience, instinct, and social structure. Continuing learning. Even as adults, Massospondylus never stopped learning. Seasonal changes, new predators, and environmental shifts required constant adaptation. Adults refined feeding strategies, adjusted herd formations, and adapted to terrain changes. Humor, observation, and subtle experimentation remained important. An adult might test new grazing spots, nudge juveniles in playful ways, or respond to unexpected situations with creativity. Growth wasn't confined to youth. Lifelong adaptation ensured survival and success. Balancing strength and caution. Adulthood brought both strength and responsibility. While adults were larger and more capable of defending themselves, vigilance remained essential. Predators still lurked, and coordination within the herd remained critical. The balance between confidence and caution was delicate. Adults guided the herd with experience, using size and awareness to protect juveniles while maintaining mobility and efficiency. Survival relied on wisdom as much as physical power. Humor in adult life. Even in adulthood, humor remained a subtle thread in daily life. Adults occasionally misjudge footing, bump into each other, or playfully interact with juveniles. These moments strengthened bonds and reminded everyone that survival and cooperation could coexist with lightheartedness. Such interactions reinforced social cohesion, teaching younger members the rules of herd life while maintaining a sense of calm and rhythm. Even the largest giants found ways to blend seriousness with amusement. From tiny hatchlings to long-necked adults, Massospondylus experienced a remarkable journey. Each stage of life brought new challenges, skills, and responsibilities. Hatchlings learned balance and safety. Juveniles refined coordination, social skills, and predator awareness. Adults mastered survival, leadership, and reproduction. The life cycle was a continuous story of learning and adaptation, with humor, play, and curiosity woven through every stage. Even mistakes, stumbles, and clumsy tumbles contributed to growth, teaching essential lessons that ensured survival. Survival through knowledge. Survival wasn't just about size or strength. Awareness, experience, and cooperation within the herd were equally vital. Young dinosaurs observed, mimicked, and experimented. Adults guided, protected, and taught. The combination of instinct and learned behavior allowed Massospondylus to navigate a world filled with predators, shifting environments, and competition for resources. Each generation benefited from the experience of the previous one. Lessons passed down through observation, subtle cues, and social interaction ensured that the herd remained resilient and adaptable. Life was a constant negotiation between risk and reward, curiosity and caution. Humor and play across ages. From hatchlings to adults, humor and play were never absent. Juveniles tumbled, collided, and experimented with their surroundings. Adults occasionally nudged each other or engaged in playful sparring. These interactions weren't frivolous. They reinforced coordination, social bonds, and understanding of herd dynamics. Even in the presence of danger, moments of levity reminded the herd to remain adaptable and resilient. Humor was a small but essential thread running through the fabric of life, softening the intensity of survival and enhancing cohesion. Reproduction and continuity. Adulthood brought reproductive responsibility. Adults selected nesting sites, protected eggs, and ensured hatchlings had a safe environment to begin life. The cycle repeated, with each generation growing stronger, wiser, and more coordinated than the last. Hatchlings benefited not only from adult protection but also from the rich environment created by the herd. Safe feeding areas, guidance in predator avoidance, and lessons in social behavior. Life continued, shaped by instinct, experience, and social learning. Long-term survival strategies. Massospondylus relied on several strategies to thrive across its life stages. Herd cooperation, collective vigilance, coordinated movement, and shared protection. Social learning, observation and imitation of adults, teaching survival skills to juveniles. Physical adaptation, growth of long necks, strong tails, and muscular legs to access food and evade predators. Humor and play, practicing coordination, reinforcing bonds, and easing tension. These strategies ensured resilience, allowing Massospondylus to persist in a predator-rich, dynamic environment over millions of years. Reflections on life. Imagine the plains at dusk. A herd of Massospondylus rests. Juveniles nestled safely in the center, learning from subtle movements and low calls. Adults positioned strategically, guiding, protecting, and subtly instructing. The breeze rustling ferns, cycad swaying, and distant predators moving silently. Life is a balance: safety and risk, play and learning, growth and caution. Each stage contributes to the whole, creating a story of adaptation, resilience, and continuity. A gentle good night. Close your eyes and picture a young Massospondylus resting in the safety of the herd. Tiny legs tucked beneath it, eyes half closed, ears flicking occasionally. Adults on the edges, alert but relaxed, tails swaying slowly. The quiet symphony of the early Jurassic plains, rustling leaves, distant calls, and the gentle hum of life. Even in a world full of challenges, Massospondylus grows, learns, and survives. From hatchling to adult, life unfolds with lessons, laughter, and the gentle rhythm of nature. Good night, young giants. Good night, wise adults. Sleep well, surrounded by your herd, in a world both beautiful and challenging, and know that life continues, steady and enduring, across the ancient plains. For Massospondylus, life often revolved around food. Every morning, the herd awoke with a purpose: find nourishment, grow, and survive. Unlike predators, their work didn't involve chasing prey, but understanding the forest, plains, and gardens of ferns, cycads, and horsetails that made up their early Jurassic world. A herbivore's daily routine. Massospondylus had a simple yet vital routine. Adults led the herd to the most abundant feeding grounds, while juveniles followed, learning which plants were best to eat. The group moved slowly, grazing along the way, with occasional pauses to check for predators. Eating was both necessity and training. Young dinosaurs learned by observation and trial. How high could their necks reach? Which leaves were tender or tough? How to chew efficiently? These questions guided every bite and nibble. Humor sometimes interrupted the routine. Juveniles might stumble while reaching a high fern or accidentally knock over a small plant while tugging at a tasty leaf. Adults tolerated these little mistakes, understanding that they were part of the learning process. Favorite foods. Massospondylus had preferences, shaped by availability and ease of consumption. Ferns. Soft and abundant, ferns were the staple for juveniles and adults alike. They provided nutrients without requiring much effort. Cycads. Tougher and higher growing, these were more suitable for adults with longer necks and stronger jaws. Horsetails. Fibrous but plentiful, horsetails added variety to the diet. Conifers. Low branches occasionally, the herd would reach for low-hanging branches, supplementing their meals with richer nutrition. Feeding wasn't mindless. Adults led, juveniles observed, and subtle social lessons were embedded in every bite. Timing, coordination, and patience all contributed to efficient grazing. Grazing techniques. Massospondylus developed several strategies for feeding efficiently. Neck reach. Their long necks allowed them to access high leaves without moving their bulky bodies too much, conserving energy. Bipedal browsing. Sometimes, juveniles or smaller adults could rise on their hind legs to reach slightly higher plants, wobbling comically but learning balance in the process. Selective eating. They learned which plants were nutritious, which were tough, and which were spiky or toxic. Coordinated grazing. In herds, members spread out just enough to avoid overcrowding, maximizing food intake while maintaining safety. Even small miscalculations, like a juvenile misjudging a branch's reach, offered lessons in coordination and awareness. Humor and learning were inseparable. Feeding in a herd. Herd life transformed feeding from a solitary task into a social activity. Adults maintained positions to protect juveniles while grazing. Juveniles stayed in the center, observing and mimicking adults' techniques. Coordination mattered. Too close, and one dinosaur could accidentally knock another while reaching for food. Too far, and a juvenile might stray into danger. The herd balanced safety and efficiency, creating a moving classroom where every meal reinforced survival skills. Seasonal variations. The availability of plants wasn't constant. During certain seasons, ferns might dominate the plains, while cycads and horsetails thrived in specific areas. Adults guided the herd to these areas, ensuring consistent nourishment. Seasonal changes also influenced behavior. During lean periods, juveniles learned patience, adults rationed energy, and the herd adapted its movement to maximize access to food. Humor occasionally slipped in. Imagine a juvenile misjudging the distance to a sparse fern, wobbling dramatically, and creating a brief moment of chaos. Even in scarcity, life had its little jokes. Diet and physical growth. What Massospondylus ate directly influenced how they grew. Nutrient-rich ferns promoted strong bones and healthy muscles. Cycads and horsetails contributed to dental and jaw development. Balanced feeding allowed juveniles to grow quickly and adults to maintain energy for vigilance, migration, and reproduction. Food wasn't just survival. It was growth, learning, and preparation for life's challenges. Every bite shaped the body, skills, and social understanding of these long-necked giants. Massospondylus developed clever ways to eat efficiently. Their long necks weren't just for show. They allowed them to reach high vegetation while conserving energy. Adults could graze tall cycads or low-hanging conifers without moving their massive bodies too much. Juveniles practiced their own techniques, often in amusing ways. Some attempted to reach higher leaves by standing partially upright on hind legs. This bipedal browsing required balance and coordination, and more often than not, resulted in wobbles, small tumbles, or accidental nudges of a sibling. Learning through trial, error, and humor shaped both skills and confidence. Competition and cooperation. Even in a herd, feeding wasn't entirely peaceful. Juveniles sometimes competed for prime leaves or tender ferns. These minor conflicts were short-lived and playful, but they taught important lessons. How to judge distance and timing. How to respect social cues from adults. How to negotiate access to resources without causing chaos. Adults rarely needed to intervene, their presence alone enough to maintain order. The subtle rules of the herd ensured that cooperation often outweighed competition, turning feeding into a social and educational experience. Adapting to plant defenses. Plants weren't defenseless. Some ferns had tough stems, cycads grew fibrous leaves, and horsetails were spiky. Massospondylus adapted over time to handle these challenges. Adults taught juveniles by example, carefully selecting the tenderest parts of a plant, using the edges of teeth to shear leaves, adjusting body position to avoid injury. Juveniles learn through observation and experimentation, often comically misjudging the toughness of a leaf and wobbling dramatically as they pulled or chewed. These humorous moments were essential for honing physical skill and awareness. Feeding efficiency. Efficiency mattered for survival. Grazing too slowly wasted time and left the herd exposed to predators. Eating too hastily risked injury or missing tender leaves. Massospondylus found balance through experience. Spreading out in the herd to reduce crowding. Taking turns at prime feeding spots. Coordinating movement to access new patches of vegetation. Even humorous mistakes, like a juvenile accidentally toppling a fern while reaching, helped refine technique. Each error was a lesson, a gentle reminder that learning often comes with a laugh. Daily feeding routine. Massospondylus Day often began with early morning grazing, followed by brief pauses in shaded areas for rest or social bonding. Adults led the herd to rich feeding grounds, juveniles followed, and subtle cues ensured cohesion. Feeding was punctuated by gentle lessons. An adult might nudge a juvenile toward a better leaf or subtly indicate which fern to nibble. Over time, these lessons built expertise, enabling juveniles to eventually feed independently and contribute to herd efficiency. Humor during meals. Even the act of eating provided moments of amusement. A juvenile might misjudge the distance to a tasty fern, stumble, and fall into a sibling. Adults might get in the way while trying to reach a branch, causing minor chaos in the herd. These moments weren't just funny. They reinforced social learning, spatial awareness, and herd coordination. Humor softened the intensity of survival while embedding practical lessons in every interaction. Seasonal shifts in diet. Plant availability changed with seasons, forcing adaptation. During lean times, juveniles learned patience, adults rationed energy, and the herd adjusted movement to find sufficient food. Some seasonal changes even led to creative feeding strategies. For instance, a juvenile might stretch awkwardly to reach the last tender leaf of a cycad while adults grazed nearby. These small challenges honed problem-solving, coordination, and persistence. Massospondylus had several adaptations that made feeding more effective. Their long necks allowed them to reach high leaves without moving their massive bodies too far. Strong, muscular jaws with leaf-shaped teeth enabled them to strip foliage efficiently. Juveniles practiced these techniques with clumsy enthusiasm. A young dinosaur might overreach for a cycad leaf, wobble, and topple into a patch of ferns. While it looked funny, these small errors helped refine balance, coordination, and precision. Even the tail played a role. While not directly used for feeding, it helped maintain balance when reaching for leaves or standing upright. Every body part contributed to efficient, safe grazing. Digestive strategies. Eating plants isn't simple. Fibrous leaves, tough stems, and sometimes spiky horsetails required a digestive system capable of breaking down tough vegetation. Massospondylus likely had a large gut for fermentation, allowing it to extract nutrients from high-fiber plants. Juveniles gradually adapted to this diet. Early on, they focused on soft ferns and young plants. As they grew, their digestive capacity expanded, enabling them to process tougher cycads and horsetails. Humor often accompanied this stage. A juvenile might attempt to chew a particularly tough leaf, wobble dramatically, and pause before retreating to a safer snack. Adults demonstrated efficiency, chewing and swallowing in a steady rhythm. Juveniles observed, learning which plants were easiest to digest and how to pace themselves for long feeding sessions. Social feeding. Feeding was also social. Herds coordinated grazing, spreading out just enough to avoid crowding but staying close for safety. Adults positioned themselves strategically, watching for predators while also setting an example for juveniles. Even during meals, subtle teaching occurred. An adult might nudge a juvenile toward a more nutritious fern or indicate a better position for feeding. Juveniles absorbed these lessons, learning not only about food but also about social cooperation and herd dynamics. Humor in feeding. Moments of humor were common. A juvenile might misjudge a fern's sturdiness, stumble, and topple over, creating a cascade of minor chaos among siblings. Adults occasionally miscalculate distances, accidentally nudging a neighbor, or attempting to reach a low branch that shifts under their weight. These small incidents served multiple purposes: reinforcing balance and coordination, teaching spatial awareness, strengthening social bonds through shared amusement. Even in the serious business of feeding, play and laughter were essential components of learning and growth. Feeding during migration. During seasonal migrations, feeding became more strategic. Herds needed to find new pastures and ensure juveniles received enough nutrition. Adults guided movement toward areas rich in cycads, ferns, and horsetails, carefully balancing distance, energy expenditure, and predator vigilance. Juveniles learned navigation while grazing. Following adults, testing terrain, and adjusting positions became part of daily education. Humor occasionally surfaced. A young Massospondylus might attempt to grab the last tender leaf before adults, stumble, and bounce harmlessly, earning a gentle nudge from a parent. Balancing safety and nutrition. Feeding required balancing nutrition with safety. Staying in a herd minimized predator risk, but venturing too far for high-quality food was tempting. Adults taught juveniles to assess risk, when to stay central, when to graze near the edges, and when to follow the herd's movement. Even during these lessons, moments of levity appeared. A juvenile might stretch too far, wobble, or collide with a sibling, creating humorous mini-chaos. These events reinforced practical lessons while easing tension in an otherwise cautious environment. Massospondylus wasn't just a grazer, it was a strategist. Every meal involved a combination of observation, coordination, and learned behavior. Adults guided the herd to the richest vegetation, juveniles followed, and subtle social cues ensured cohesion. Feeding strategies included long-necked reach, accessing tall cycads and conifers with minimal energy. Selective grazing, choosing tender leaves over tough or spiky vegetation. Bipedal browsing, juveniles occasionally stood on hind legs to reach slightly higher plants. Coordinated herd movement, spreading just enough to avoid crowding while maintaining safety. Even small mistakes, like a juvenile misjudging a branch or a minor stumble, taught lessons in balance, coordination, and awareness, often accompanied by moments of humor. Diet diversity. The early Jurassic world offered variety, and Massospondylus took advantage of it. A balanced diet included ferns for soft, easy-to-digest nutrition, cycads for tougher, fiber-rich meals, horsetails for variety and resilience, and low-hanging conifers for occasional supplementation. Seasonal changes influenced diet. When ferns were scarce, cycads and horsetails became more important. Adults guided the herd, ensuring juveniles learn flexibility and adaptability in their feeding habits. Social coordination. Herd life transformed feeding into a group activity. Adults acted as sentinels while grazing, juveniles stayed close to learn, and subtle communication maintained order. Tail flicks, head movements, and low rumbles conveyed messages about safety, movement, and feeding opportunities. Social learning was ongoing. Every meal reinforced awareness, cooperation, and coordination. Even humorous moments, a juvenile tumbling over a sibling or wobbling while stretching, helped teach spatial awareness and group dynamics. Humor in daily feeding. Humor, surprisingly, was a constant companion. Juveniles experimenting with new plants or stretching for higher leaves often created minor chaos. Adults occasionally misjudged their reach or nudged a neighbor unintentionally. These moments lightened the seriousness of survival, reinforced physical coordination, strengthened social bonds. Even in a world of predators and scarcity, laughter and play were intertwined with learning and survival. Feeding and growth. What Massospondylus ate directly influenced growth, health, and survival. Proper nutrition fueled rapid juvenile development, supported adult energy needs, and ensured reproductive success. Efficient feeding allowed the herd to grow, move, and thrive in a challenging environment. Diet was more than survival, it shaped every aspect of life. Physical growth, social learning, coordination, and adaptation. Each meal was a lesson, a strategy, and a step toward the next stage of life. Reflections on herd feeding. Imagine the herd at sunset. Adults grazing on the tallest cycads, necks swaying gracefully. Juveniles nibbling on ferns, practicing balance, and occasionally tumbling in playful chaos. The subtle hum of social communication passing through the group. Tail flicks, low rumbles, and gentle nudges. Seasonal breezes carrying the scent of fresh vegetation, rustling ferns, and the quiet rhythm of survival. Life in a herd blends nourishment, cooperation, and subtle humor. Every meal reinforces skills, social bonds, and resilience, teaching juveniles how to grow, adults how to lead, and the entire herd how to thrive. A gentle good night. Close your eyes and imagine a young Massospondylus resting after a day of grazing. Tiny legs tucked beneath it, eyes half closed, ears flicking occasionally. Adults nearby, alert but calm, protecting the herd and guiding learning. leaves rustling gently, cycad swaying, and the quiet pulse of life across the Jurassic plains. Even in a world full of challenges, Massospondylus eats, grows, learns, and thrives. Each bite, each stumble, and each playful moment contributes to a story of survival, cooperation, and gentle rhythm across the ancient landscape. Good night, young grazers. Good night, wise adults. Sleep well, surrounded by your herd, in a world abundant with life, lessons, and laughter. Even though Massospondylus spent much of its day peacefully grazing, the early Jurassic world was not without danger. Predators lurked in the shadows, always watching, always ready. From small but cunning hunters to larger carnivores, survival depended on vigilance, herd coordination, and a keen sense of awareness. The predatory landscape. The plains, forests, and riverbanks of the early Jurassic were home to many threats. While Massospondylus was not the fastest or the fiercest, it had its own advantages. Size. Adults could reach lengths of 4 to 6 meters, making them a difficult target. Herd behavior. Safety in numbers, with adults shielding juveniles and guiding herd movement. Alertness. Keen senses, including sharp vision and awareness of subtle environmental changes. Predators, however, were patient and adaptive. They observed the herd's movements, tested boundaries, and waited for mistakes. Juveniles, with their clumsiness and curiosity, were particularly vulnerable, making herd vigilance essential. Small predators. Smaller carnivores could be just as dangerous as larger ones. They were often quick, agile, and capable of harassing juveniles or isolated herd members. These predators tested Massospondylus coordination, communication, and response strategies. Juveniles learned to recognize rustling leaves, sudden shadows, and unusual movements. Adults reinforced safety by positioning themselves strategically, creating a living barrier around the young. Humor sometimes emerged even in tense situations. A juvenile might misinterpret a harmless shadow as a predator, wobbly retreating into a sibling, causing a momentary comic chaos in the herd. Adults tolerated these mistakes, knowing they were valuable learning experiences. Large predators. Larger carnivores presented a more serious threat. These predators could take down adult Massospondylus if given the chance, making herd coordination and vigilance even more critical. Ambush predators, lurking behind vegetation, waiting for the herd to stray or a juvenile to wander. Chasing predators, attempting to isolate weaker individuals and force a mistake. The herd's survival relied on collective awareness. Adults patrolled edges, juveniles stayed near the center, and subtle cues, tail flicks, low rumbles, neck movements, communicated danger efficiently. Herd defense strategies. Massospondylus had evolved several strategies to avoid becoming a meal. Positioning. Adults formed protective barriers around juveniles. Vigilance. Constant awareness of surroundings, combined with subtle cues to alert the herd. Mobility. Quick movement when necessary, relying on coordination rather than speed alone. Communication. Tail flicks, rumbles, and postures indicated threats without causing panic. Even playful interactions prepared the herd for defense. Mock chases and minor tussles taught juveniles coordination, timing, and the art of quick movement, skills crucial during predator encounters. Learning through experience. Juveniles learned about predators primarily through observation and experience. Adults demonstrated responses, such as freezing, repositioning, or moving swiftly. Each encounter, even minor or false alarms, taught recognition of cues and appropriate reactions. Humor often softened the tension. A juvenile might misread a rustling bush, stumble while fleeing, or bump into a sibling. These moments were embarrassing but instructional, reinforcing agility, awareness, and social cooperation. Humor and tension. Even in a dangerous world, moments of levity existed. Mistakes by juveniles created short-lived chaos, tripping over tails, nudging a sibling mid-flight, or misinterpreting harmless objects. Adults tolerated this, knowing that laughter, mistakes, and minor chaos were part of learning to survive. Humor and danger intertwined, balancing tension with subtle relief. This balance ensured that juveniles remained engaged, alert, and gradually adept at navigating threats. Even in a well-coordinated herd, close encounters with predators were inevitable. Juveniles often bore the brunt of these interactions, testing their instincts and the herd's collective response. Adults responded swiftly, positioning themselves between danger and the young, while subtle signals rippled through the group. Imagine a small predator darting from a clump of ferns, aiming for a wandering juvenile. The herd reacts almost as one. An adult raises its head, scanning the area. A tail flick sends a warning ripple. Juveniles freeze or huddle closer to the center. Sometimes, humor sneaks in. A juvenile might misinterpret a harmless shadow as a predator, skidding comically into a sibling or adult, creating a brief moment of chaotic amusement before calm is restored. Even in tense situations, these moments teach vital lessons about awareness, coordination, and social cohesion. Predator strategies. Predators employed various tactics, each requiring different responses from Massospondylus. Ambush, lurking quietly, waiting for the herd to stray or a juvenile to separate. The key defense was vigilance and staying within the protective circle of adults. Stalking, following the herd, looking for patterns, weaknesses, or slow individuals. Adults and juveniles alike learned to move unpredictably, making stalking less effective. Surprise attacks, quick lunges or sudden chases aimed at creating panic. Herd cohesion reduced panic, with adults guiding orderly retreats rather than chaotic flight. Juveniles learned to recognize these strategies through experience, observation, and gentle corrections from adults. Each encounter sharpened instincts, teaching balance between caution and confidence. Escape and evasion. Speed wasn't the strongest suit of Massospondylus, but coordination and herd tactics made up for it. When threatened, adults guided the herd in coordinated movement, using long legs and tail balance to evade danger. Juveniles practiced following patterns, reacting to cues, and maintaining formation. Herds moved in ways that could confuse or deter predators, creating moments where size, numbers, and coordination outweighed raw speed. Humor sometimes softened tense moments. A juvenile might trip or misstep mid-escape, creating a ripple of commotion. Adults corrected positions calmly, turning the stumble into a practical lesson about agility, timing, and herd movement. Social learning in danger. Danger wasn't just about survival. It was a classroom for juveniles. They learned how to read subtle environmental cues, when to freeze, flee, or huddle, how to maintain spatial awareness within the herd, how adults communicated warnings through posture, rumbles, and tail flicks. Even minor errors became lessons. A juvenile's accidental bump into an adult during a predator alert reinforced awareness and the importance of following cues. Humor, embarrassment, and quick corrections combined to create a powerful learning environment. Herd coordination. Coordination was key. Adults often positioned themselves at strategic points, flanking juveniles to create protective walls, guiding herd movement to avoid ambush-prone areas, maintaining visual contact with each other to ensure no individual was isolated. Juveniles gradually learned to move in harmony, adjusting pace and position without being explicitly told. This subtle synchronization allowed the herd to respond almost instinctively to threats, blending observation, instinct, and social learning into effective defense. Humor amidst tension. Even when predators were near, humorous incidents occurred. A juvenile might misjudge the distance to a bush and stumble. Siblings could collide mid-flee, causing a minor pile-up. Adults might accidentally nudge each other while guiding escape routes. These small, light-hearted events weren't dangerous. They reinforced physical coordination, herd awareness, and social bonds. Humor and survival worked hand in hand, creating a dynamic, resilient environment. Reflection on predator awareness. Predators shaped every aspect of Massospondylus life. They influenced herd structure and social roles, juvenile learning and experience, daily routines and feeding locations, play and mock interactions that developed coordination. Even with threats looming, the herd maintained a rhythm, cautious yet calm, alert yet playful. Life wasn't just about danger, it was about growth, learning, and the gentle balance of survival. Imagine a quiet morning on the early Jurassic plains. The herd grazes peacefully among ferns and cycads. Suddenly, a small, quick predator, sharp teeth, nimble legs, stalks a wandering juvenile. The response is almost instinctive. An adult raises its head, scanning the area. The herd tightens, positioning adults around juveniles. A low rumble passes through the herd, a warning signal. The juvenile, startled, stumbles backward, accidentally nudging a sibling. A brief moment of comic chaos ensues, but no harm is done. The predator retreats, realizing the herd is alert and coordinated. Even in a near-dangerous situation, humor and play become learning tools. The juvenile learns vigilance, positioning, and how to respond without panic. Adults model calm, reinforcing lessons without unnecessary stress. Case study: chase by a larger carnivore. Later in the day, a larger predator approaches, a more formidable threat. Adults must guide the herd to safety while maintaining order and preventing panic. Herd movement becomes synchronized, with adults on the flanks and juveniles in the center. Long legs and tail balance allow adults to navigate obstacles while keeping a steady pace. Subtle cues, tail flicks, neck movements, direct juveniles to maintain formation. Humor sneaks in again. A juvenile misjudges a leap over a small stream, skidding into a sibling, creating a short-lived tumble. Adults correct positions calmly, turning the mishap into a practical lesson. Even dangerous encounters carry opportunities for learning. Coordination, balance, and social awareness are reinforced with every step. Defensive maneuvers. Massospondylus employed several defensive strategies. Protective circles. Adults form a barrier around juveniles, creating a moving wall. Distraction tactics. Adults sometimes move closer to predators to mislead or delay attacks. Herd mobility. Coordinated steps allow the herd to escape ambushes without losing cohesion. Communication. Tail flicks, rumbles, and body posture convey warnings efficiently. Humor occasionally enters these tense moments. An adult might miscalculate its footing or accidentally nudge a neighbor, causing minor chaos. Even these moments reinforce awareness, balance, and herd coordination. Learning from near misses. Near misses are valuable lessons. Juveniles learn that not every shadow is a predator, but that caution is essential. They understand herd patterns, reading adult cues, and predicting movements. A small stumble or accidental bump provides practical instruction. Where to step, how to balance, and how to respond under pressure. Humor and minor chaos turn fear into teaching, building resilience and adaptability. Humor and social bonding. Even in predator-rich environments, humor maintains social bonds. Playful nudges, missteps, and clumsy escapes lighten tension while reinforcing coordination. Adults tolerate these incidents, knowing that laughter and minor mistakes strengthen learning and cohesion. Herd life balances vigilance and amusement. Survival doesn't mean constant fear. Subtle humor and social play ensure that juveniles grow confident, coordinated, and alert. Reflection on predator influence. Predators shaped every aspect of Massospondylus life. Herd structure and social hierarchy. Juvenile learning and skill development. Feeding patterns and daily routines. Play and mock interactions that developed coordination and resilience. Life was a dance between caution and curiosity, fear and humor, survival and growth. Predators were constant, but the herd's adaptive strategies, coordination, and subtle teaching turned danger into an essential part of life and learning. Massospondylus survived in a predator-filled world not by brute force alone but through strategy, coordination, and vigilance. Over time, several key strategies ensured the herd thrived. Herd cohesion, staying together, with adults protecting juveniles, minimized vulnerability. Observation and learning. Juveniles watched adults and learned how to interpret danger cues. Communication. Tail flicks, low rumbles, and subtle movements conveyed warnings without panic. Coordination. Synchronizing movement during grazing, migration, or escape ensured efficiency and safety. Humor and play reinforced these strategies. Wobbles, tumbles, and minor chaos became lessons, turning mistakes into survival skills. Predator prevention. Adults took the lead in predator prevention. They positioned themselves strategically around juveniles, guided herd movement, and monitored the environment constantly. Ambush-prone areas were avoided. Juveniles were kept near the center of the herd. Feeding sites were chosen with safety in mind as well as nourishment. Even small mistakes, like a juvenile misinterpreting a shadow, provided teaching moments. Each incident reinforced awareness, response time, and herd cohesion. Humor as a teaching tool. Humor played a subtle but vital role in survival. Juveniles learned through trial and error, and minor mishaps were often amusing. A young Massospondylus might stumble while fleeing, collide with a sibling, or misjudge a small obstacle. These events built physical coordination, strengthened social bonds, enhanced alertness without adding stress. Even in tense moments, laughter and play helped maintain herd harmony and ensured that juveniles internalized lessons in a positive, memorable way. Reflection on life in a predator-filled world. Imagine the herd at sunset. Adults positioned strategically, scanning for danger. Juveniles nestled in the center, alert and learning. Subtle tail flicks and low rumbles passed through the herd, communicating warnings and guidance. The early Jurassic plains hum quietly, leaves rustling and predators lurking at a distance. Life wasn't only about fear, it was about vigilance, coordination, learning, and sometimes a touch of humor. Each day brought challenges, but also lessons, growth, and survival. The balance of risk and safety. Predators shaped Massospondylus behavior, social structure, and daily life. Survival required balancing risk with caution, freedom with security, and curiosity with awareness. Even as adults grew confident and strong, vigilance remained. Herd life created a rhythm. Young dinosaurs learned through observation and play, adults guided with experience, and humor threaded through every interaction. The result was a dynamic, resilient group capable of thriving despite the ever-present threat of predators. A gentle good night. Close your eyes and picture a herd at rest after a day of grazing and predator awareness. Juveniles tucked safely in the center, eyes half closed, learning even in rest. Adults standing watch, relaxed but alert, tails swaying gently. The gentle hum of the plains, rustling ferns, distant calls, and the quiet rhythm of survival. In a world full of threats, Massospondylus grows, learns, and thrives. Each alert glance, careful step, and playful tumble contributes to a story of vigilance, learning, and resilience. Good night, young grazers. Good night, wise adults. Sleep safely, surrounded by your herd, in a world both challenging and full of life lessons, humor, and gentle rhythms. Even though Massospondylus spent much of its life grazing, feeding, and avoiding predators, life on the early Jurassic plains often required movement. Seasons changed, plants matured or died back, and new feeding grounds needed to be found. Migration and territory navigation became central to survival, social cohesion, and herd learning. Why move? Massospondylus didn't migrate long distances like modern wildebeest, but they did move strategically to access fresh vegetation and avoid overgrazed areas. Food availability. As ferns, cycads, and horsetails were consumed, new patches needed exploration. Water sources, rivers and streams dictated movement during dry periods. Safety. Some areas were more exposed to predators. Adults guided the herd towards safer feeding grounds. Juveniles learned through observation and gentle nudging. They began to understand patterns, when to move, where to follow, and how to navigate unfamiliar terrain. Herd navigation. Herd movement wasn't random. Adults led with experience, guiding the group across plains, hills, and riverbanks. Juveniles followed, learning routes, subtle cues, and terrain awareness. Frontline adults, often older, more experienced individuals, scanned ahead for food and danger. Flank adults, positioned on sides to prevent stragglers from wandering and to shield against predators. Center juveniles, protected and taught, observing every move of the adults. Humor occasionally punctuated migration. A juvenile might misjudge a small stream, wobble, or slip, creating a brief ripple of chaos before resuming the journey. Even minor stumbles became lessons in coordination and awareness. Territory awareness. Massospondylus didn't mark territory like some modern mammals, but they were aware of safe feeding zones and danger-prone areas. Herds developed a mental map of resources and hazards. Safe feeding zones, areas abundant in soft ferns and cycads, with clear sightlines to detect predators. Hazard zones, dense vegetation or low-lying areas where predators could hide. Seasonal paths, routes followed during seasonal changes to access water and fresh plants. Juveniles learned these maps gradually. Observation, practice, and occasional playful errors, like exploring a slightly dangerous area, helped them internalize the herd's collective knowledge. Social learning during migration. Migration wasn't only about reaching food, it was a classroom for survival skills. Adults taught observation, how to read terrain for food and safety cues. Coordination, keeping pace with the herd while avoiding obstacles. Awareness, recognizing potential predators along the route. Even humor became part of learning. A juvenile might misstep, wobble, or bump a sibling mid-march, prompting gentle corrections. These moments built balance, agility, and awareness, reinforcing the herd's unspoken rules. Seasonal migration. Although not long-distance travelers, Massospondylus likely followed seasonal patterns, moving to areas with new growth after dry spells, avoiding areas where vegetation had been depleted, shifting closer to water sources during dry periods. Adults guided these movements with experience, ensuring that juveniles learned the rhythms of the land, the locations of safe feeding grounds, and the optimal routes for movement. Humor on the move. Migration could be tedious, especially for juveniles with shorter legs and boundless curiosity. Humor and play lightened the monotony. A juvenile might try to sprint ahead, stumble, and tumble into a sibling. Adults might nudge each other accidentally while navigating tight spaces. Minor chaos reinforced lessons in pacing, coordination, and herd movement. Even in a serious process like migration, laughter and light-hearted missteps played a subtle but essential role in teaching and maintaining social bonds. Massospondylus often moved across vast open plains in search of fresh vegetation. These journeys required careful observation, herd coordination, and subtle communication. Adults led, juveniles followed, and the group adapted to terrain challenges along the way. Hilly terrain. Adults guided the herd along slopes, teaching juveniles how to balance while climbing or descending. River crossings. Shallow streams presented both nourishment and hazards. Juveniles learned to step carefully, sometimes wobbling or slipping comically, before mastering the crossing. Dense vegetation. Moving through ferns or cycads required careful coordination. Adults nudged slower juveniles gently, ensuring the herd maintained formation. Even small missteps offered lessons. A juvenile might trip on a root, stumble into a sibling, or misjudge a small hill, creating minor chaos, but also a memorable opportunity to learn balance and coordination. Routes and patterns. Migration and movement followed certain predictable patterns. Morning movement. The herd often started the day heading toward nutrient-rich feeding grounds. Midday rest. In warmer periods, adults led the herd to shaded areas for rest and digestion. Evening grazing. As temperatures cooled, the herd moved to new grazing spots, often avoiding predator-prone zones. Juveniles learned timing and routine through repeated exposure. Observing adults' pacing, stopping points, and feeding choices taught them when and where it was safe to move, eat, or rest. Predator-aware movement. Even routine migration required vigilance. Predators often targeted individuals who strayed from the herd or lagged behind. Adults taught juveniles to stay within the protective circle. Watch for subtle environmental cues like rustling leaves or distant movement. Respond calmly to signals without panicking. Humor lightened tense moments. A juvenile might misinterpret a harmless rustle as a predator, wobble comically while huddling with a sibling, and cause a ripple of mini chaos. Adults corrected positions calmly, reinforcing vigilance while keeping stress low. Social coordination on the move. Herd movement was as much about teaching as traveling. Adults modeled proper pacing and spacing to avoid collisions. Efficient navigation through uneven terrain. How to respond to unexpected obstacles or sounds. Juveniles absorbed lessons naturally. Playful errors, tripping, nudging, or misjudging distances, reinforced learning, balance, and herd awareness. Even in the serious task of migration, humor remained an essential teaching tool. Seasonal adjustments. Seasonal changes required flexibility. Drier periods prompted movement closer to water sources, while times of abundant growth allowed the herd to spread out for grazing. Adults guided the herd according to the season. Identifying new feeding grounds. Avoiding depleted or predator-heavy areas. Teaching juveniles the patterns of seasonal availability. Juveniles learned to anticipate environmental shifts, adjusting behavior and movement accordingly. Minor missteps during these adjustments, slipping in mud or tumbling over roots, became playful lessons in adaptation. Humor during migration. Even long movements had moments of levity. Juveniles' boundless energy sometimes clashed with the herd's steady pace. Sprinting ahead, then tripping into siblings. Investigating interesting but irrelevant plants along the way. Adults misjudging footing, causing minor nudges or collisions. These humorous incidents reinforced important skills: balance, coordination, spatial awareness, and patience. The herd's rhythm continued, blending learning, survival, and subtle amusement. Reflection on migration. Migration was more than movement. It was a living classroom. Juveniles learned terrain, herd coordination, predator awareness, and timing. Adults guided, corrected, and occasionally tolerated minor chaos. Even humor played a role, making lessons memorable while keeping tension manageable. Life in the early Jurassic was full of challenges, but careful observation, herd coordination, and subtle play ensured survival and growth. Massospondylus didn't mark territory like some modern animals, but each herd understood the bounds of safe feeding areas and hazard zones. These mental maps were essential for survival and efficient grazing. Safe zones, areas rich in ferns, cycads, and horsetails, with clear sightlines for spotting predators. Hazard zones, dense vegetation or regions frequented by predators. Seasonal zones, regions that became safe or dangerous depending on water availability and plant growth. Adults guided the herd within these boundaries, teaching juveniles to recognize subtle cues that indicated safety or danger. Over time, juveniles learned to navigate independently, understanding the herd's collective knowledge. Interactions with other herds. Occasionally, different Massospondylus herds crossed paths. Adults managed these encounters with care. Non-aggressive contact. Most interactions involved mutual observation and avoidance. Herds respected each other's boundaries and moved on. Minor tensions, occasional disputes over prime feeding spots could create short bursts of chaotic but controlled interactions. Juveniles observed how adults handled such situations calmly. Social learning. Young dinosaurs learned to navigate social cues, reading body language, posture, and subtle gestures to understand hierarchy and safety. Humor often arose during these encounters. A juvenile might misinterpret a harmless gesture from another herd, stumble, or create a small pile-up with siblings. Adults used these moments to reinforce awareness and social coordination. Obstacles during migration. Migration paths weren't always smooth. Herds encountered streams and rivers. Crossing required careful balance and sometimes creative solutions. Uneven terrain. Hills, rocks, and fallen logs tested coordination and agility. Thick vegetation. Dense ferns or cycads forced the herd to slow down and move carefully. Juveniles learned through experience. Minor stumbles, slips, or accidental nudges of a sibling became memorable lessons in balance, problem-solving, and coordination. Humor lightened the learning process, making the challenges less stressful and more engaging. Predator-aware movement. Migration wasn't only about finding food, it was also about avoiding danger. Adults continually scanned for predators, adjusting speed, path, and formation as needed. Frontline adults scouted ahead for threats. Flank adults protected the sides and corrected stragglers. Center juveniles learned to follow cues and maintain formation. Even when no predator was visible, juveniles practiced vigilance. Small errors, misjudging a slope, bumping into a sibling, served as practice for real-life encounters, blending humor with learning. Teaching moments on the move. Migration offered continuous opportunities for teaching. Observation. Juveniles watched adults navigate obstacles and adjust pace. Coordination. Keeping distance while moving through narrow spaces or over uneven terrain. Problem-solving. Responding to unexpected obstacles like fallen trees or sudden streams. Social awareness. Maintaining herd cohesion and responding to subtle signals. Minor mishaps, tripping, nudging, or slipping, were tolerated, often leading to playful laughter among juveniles. These moments reinforced lessons while keeping stress low. Humor during territory exploration. Even serious navigation had its comedic moments. A juvenile misjudging a branch or route and wobbling dramatically. Siblings colliding while exploring unfamiliar terrain. Adults occasionally misstepping while guiding the herd, causing minor nudges or bumps. These incidents were more than funny. They strengthened coordination, balance, spatial awareness, and herd cohesion. Humor became an integral part of the learning process. Reflection on migration and territory. Life in the early Jurassic required both movement and awareness. Migration and territory exploration ensured access to fresh vegetation, reinforced predator vigilance and herd coordination, taught juveniles critical skills through observation, practice, and subtle humor, strengthened social bonds within the herd. Even in the midst of obstacles, minor chaos, and occasional tumbles, the herd learned, adapted, and thrived. The rhythm of movement, observation, and play became a steady part of life for Massospondylus. Massospondylus migrations weren't random. They followed seasonal rhythms. The early Jurassic climate created cycles of growth, scarcity, and water availability that shaped herd movement. Wet seasons. New ferns and cycads sprouted, prompting movement to nutrient-rich pastures. Dry seasons. Herds shifted toward streams, rivers, and shaded areas, ensuring hydration and access to remaining vegetation. Transition periods. Adults guided the herd carefully, avoiding overgrazed areas and predator-prone zones. Juveniles observed these patterns, gradually internalizing the natural rhythms of the land. Over time, they learned to anticipate changes, adjust pace, and navigate familiar routes with confidence. Collective learning. Migration served as an ongoing classroom. Juveniles absorbed lessons from adults. Route planning. Choosing efficient paths while avoiding hazards. Spatial awareness. Maintaining distance and position relative to herd members. Environmental cues. Recognizing safe areas, water sources, and potential predator zones. Coordination. Synchronizing movement with others, adjusting pace, and responding to sudden obstacles. Even minor mistakes were learning opportunities. A juvenile slipping on wet terrain, misjudging a log, or colliding with a sibling created moments of minor chaos, but also memorable lessons in agility, awareness, and herd cohesion. Humor during migration. Humor was a constant companion, even during serious journeys. A juvenile misjudging a small stream and wobbling comically before landing safely. Siblings accidentally bumping into each other while exploring new terrain. Adults occasionally misstepping while guiding the herd, causing gentle nudges and minor pile-ups. These incidents weren't just funny, they reinforced physical coordination, social awareness, and herd dynamics. Laughter and play lightened the journey, making learning enjoyable and memorable. Predator awareness on the move. Migration wasn't only about food or water. Predators remained a constant consideration. Adults taught vigilance through subtle cues. Tail flicks to signal nearby danger. Neck movements to indicate changes in direction or pace. Gentle nudges to correct positioning or reinforce caution. Juveniles practiced responding without panic, learning balance, timing, and coordination in a safe environment. Minor missteps provided realistic rehearsal for real-life threats. Social bonds and herd cohesion. Migration strengthened social bonds. By moving together, adults and juveniles developed trust, awareness, and mutual understanding. Adults protected juveniles while modeling safe movement. Juveniles learned cooperation, patience, and herd etiquette. Humor, minor mishaps, and playful interactions reinforced cohesion and learning. Life was a blend of teaching, learning, play, and vigilance. Migration transformed the landscape into a living classroom where each step taught survival, coordination, and social skills. Reflection on life in motion. Imagine a herd at dusk after a long day of migration. Adults positioned strategically, scanning the horizon for food, water, or threats. Juveniles nestled in the center, occasionally tumbling or nudging each other playfully, absorbing lessons without stress. Subtle rumbles and tail flicks passed through the group, communicating safety, guidance, and coordination. The early Jurassic plains hummed gently, rustling leaves, distant water, and the rhythm of life moving steadily forward. Migration was more than movement. It was growth, learning, and social bonding. Each step, stumble, and playful misstep contributed to the story of survival and life in a challenging yet abundant world. A gentle good night. Close your eyes and imagine the herd settling for the evening. Juveniles resting safely in the center, legs tucked beneath them, eyes slowly closing. Adults keeping watch, alert but calm, tails swaying gently. The quiet pulse of the plains, rustling ferns, flowing water, and distant calls of life. In a world of change and movement, Massospondylus thrives. Each journey, obstacle, and playful stumble teaches resilience, coordination, and the rhythms of life. Good night, young explorers. Good night, wise guides. Sleep peacefully, surrounded by your herd, in a world full of learning, laughter, and gentle motion.